Chapter 325. This ancient road had once again seethed with excitement after being isolated for 100 years, as countless young geniuses had set foot on this road to enter true Martial University. At present, however, one could see that this road had started to quiet down steadily, since the university had already opened its gates for new disciples. Yi Xuan would certainly win the top spot when it came to leaving the most profound impression on everyone, simply because many top masters had already crossed this road. He, however, was at the top of the last batch of disciples. In fact, he had already killed many formidable masters in order to successfully cross the whole way, spilling blood everywhere in the process. Along with the ringing sound of the bell, true Martial University began to accept new disciples. Everyone knew that these geniuses would by default become the disciples of true Martial University if they had managed to survive till now. However, if they weren't able to pass the grand assessment, it would be equivalent to bringing about their own destruction. Yi Xuan, at this time, was boasting a haughty appearance in front of everyone. Moreover, no one dared to mess with him, even if they envied him for having the ancient god scripture. True Martial University was located among the mountains in the central part of the southern region. Several spiritual arteries overlapped each other in the campus, and one could see the clouds and mist curling up to form a purple canopy, making this place appear like the fairyland. Located in the surroundings of the enormous True Martial mountain range was a city, rising steeply from the level ground and revolving all around the entire mountain range. One couldn't guess the real size of this settlement, but the combined land area of this city and the True Martial mountain range was almost comparable to that of a small country. Not to mention that this territory didn't belong to any country, rather it had belonged to True Martial University since the day of its establishment. Moreover, once in every 100 years, this huge city would bustle with excitement as it welcomed the new students into the city. That was why it was called an Exian City of True Martial University. Previously, even though the Yi Yuan school had also welcomed new disciples by assigning them mountain peaks, but there was an unimaginable difference between the orientations performed by these two institutions. This was an extraordinarily huge city spread all across the ravine, which was brimming with a terrifying, formidable breath. No one actually knows when this city was first established. However, countless geniuses have come out from the True Martial University over the years. Naturally, they all must have started their journey from here only. Yi Xuan said as he sighed. The Exian city's wall was very huge, and extended up to several 100 feet or more. Moreover, it stretched up to an unknown number of miles. Not to mention, this city was not like a common dynasty city, since it didn't have an army of its own. Instead, it was constantly patrolled by the disciples of True Martial University. Yi Xuan noticed some young experts hugging the wall in one particular portion to prevent themselves from falling down. They seemed quite miserable in that state. At this time, some strong figures were standing at the entrance gate. Each of them was a master of half-step legendary 3rd stage or more. In addition, some of them were exuding the dreadful aura of ominous beasts. Yi Xuan saw that dozens of such tyrannical masters were standing here. Though he couldn't figure out what were they waiting for. These people appeared to be in their 20s and 30s, and looked very young. They must be the experts of the younger generation, who had come to enter True Martial University. None of them appeared to be weak. Yi Xuan had maintained a very low profile so he could mix into the crowd comprised of young experts. More and more people were joining this ever-increasing crowd. When will they open the gate? So slow. An expert of the younger generation spoke impatiently. I am going to smash that gate open. You can go ahead if you are looking to die, but do not think of taking us with you, a young expert standing next to that young disciple sneered and said. Is there something I haven't paid attention to? How come they haven't opened the gates yet? A warrior asked to clarify his doubts. Yes. The Exian City gate would open only in the evenings for welcoming the new disciples this year. Therefore, people who arrive before, or after, will have to wait until it's time. As it stands, we will just have to wait since there are 4 hours to go before the sun sets, that young expert explained. Is there no other way to get in? Why should we wait like this for 1 full day? A man asked in a discontented tone. This is exactly the so-called killing one's prestige with a stick. We are all considered as God's favored ones, the proud young masters who have emerged from various empires, and have risen above others in the process of distinguishing ourselves. It is inevitable that some of us are going to be domineering and quite difficult to deal with. Therefore, the true martial university is using this harsh and unreasonable treatment to kill our acute spirit now itself. Didn't you notice those guys hanging from the city wall? Those idiots were caught by the senior disciples of Law Enforcement Hall, and were suspended from the wall, a disciple sneered and explained. Yeah, it's important not to do anything silly here. There is one way to go inside, and that is by directly breaking through the main gate. The main gate has an array of 108 wooden puppets. If you are capable of crashing your way through that, then you can go in directly, that disciple explained in a somewhat envious manner. However, even the experts of half-step legendary 5th stage are not capable enough to break through that array. Perhaps only the experts of half-step small complete level can manage to go inside like that. However, it seems like there is no such expert among us, or they would have already blown up those wooden puppets to go inside. Yi Shiwen smiled lightly, for he found this assessment a little mean. It basically meant that one could be arrogant if they had the required strength to do so. If one didn't have the strength, then they must be humble, and should behave properly at all times. Yi Shiwen, since there is already a way to go inside, we must breach our way in. Yi Mo said. This is also a test of one's heart and determination. This is not just the test of one's strength, but also a test of one's inner conscience. If one doesn't possess unequaled conviction, then one might not be able to continue following the path of martial arts practice anymore. Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded. It was also a test of one's own inner conscience and determination. Therefore, he must keep advancing while crashing his way through the obstacles. Yi Shiwen slowly walked towards the main gate. He heard a loud shout at this time. Then let me try. Could there be any such array which can stop me from rushing inside? A man, riding a beast, emerged from the crowd. He was a tall and young man, with dark complexion and frivolous eyebrows. A killing intent was overflowing from his eyes. He seemed to possess an invincible self-confidence, and was looking disdainfully from the corner of his eyes at the moment. He was sitting on a powerful and exceptional divine tiger that was more than 20 feet tall. Its entire body was emitting bright rays of light, and its 4 powerful claws appeared quite vigorous and effective. When brandished, any one of its claws could tear open the space. A good deal of formidable and imposing aura was discharged all of a sudden. The young man stimulated that divine tiger into moving towards the main gate. Yi Shiwen happened to be in his way too. However, the young man didn't stop, and instead increased his pace. The divine tiger suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen with an intention to kill him. Everyone's gaze turned towards Yi Shiwen as they cried out in alarm. This person had the best of misfortunes. Could it be that he would be knocked down, and killed immediately? Yi Shiwen didn't feel anything as he allowed that young man and his tiger to collide with himself. Bang! That man and his tiger released a divine beam together, and caused strong air waves to sweep across the surroundings, as if to engulf everything. Everyone held their breaths. That tiger had an excessively rampant and domineering man on its back. Before coming to the Xian city, he had planned to never give his opponent away to survive. An opponent must be killed at any cost. This kind of temperament was extremely overbearing. As smoke and dust dispersed, a surprising scene appeared in front of everyone. Although in their opinion, Yi Shiwen should have been knocked down and killed by this attack, the reality however, was entirely different. He certainly didn't die. Instead, he used just one hand to push aside that divine tiger's forehead. This dreadful attack had been blocked by Yi Shiwen without resorting to any unnecessary movements. You are courting death, that young man immediately became furious. The divine tiger he was sitting on, was also unable to control its anger, which was evident from that electric look that flashed in its eyes. Its front claw almost turned into an electric light as it advanced forward in order to grab Yi Shiwen. That electric light looked just like a blade as it advanced forward, as if it would cleave Yi Shiwen into 2 halves from the middle. No one was able to properly catch a glimpse of the vigorous movement made by that divine tiger's claw. They were all amazed in their hearts, and thought that this young man was really too strong. Not to mention that the divine tiger he was sitting on was a demon beast of half-step legendary 4th stage, or higher, and was certainly far stronger than these people. This time, that young man, who was in the way, would most likely die. It was such a pity that an outstanding genius like him had finally reached Immortal City after surviving through all the hardships and massacres, only to be killed like this outside the main gate. In a moment, rays of golden light flashed, and on contrary to everyone's expectations, Yishuan wasn't split into 2 halves, instead the divine tiger's claw was directly chopped down by his blade. That divine tiger screamed endlessly. Yi Zaiwen's complexion didn't change, even by a bit, as he shot his palm, without showing any trace sympathy, which then impacted upon the forehead of that divine tiger. Bang! That divine tiger's head was directly blasted by the explosive might of Yi Zaiwen's attack. Even a divine tiger of half-step legendary 4th stage couldn't block a single move of Yi Zaiwen's. Just what kind of backing does this man boast? Everyone was stunned. A formidable demon beast of half-step legendary 4th stage had actually been killed by Yishuan, and that too in just one move. Had they been there in his place, they would perhaps been in a far more miserable state. Yi Zaiwen's attack was so strong, that it had directly exploded that divine tiger's head. Then his palm attack advanced further, and towards that young man, only to crash into his body as well. Bang! That youngster was sent flying by the terrifying force contained in Yi Zaiwen's palm attack. In fact, it left a huge hand imprint on his chest, while his bones were shattered due to the impact. He spouted out a mouthful of blood, while his body was sent flying. Just one palm attack had killed a despotic tiger, and severely injured an arrogant man. However, it was not clear whether the young man was dead or just severely injured. Who dares to be impudent in the Immortal City? A furious shout reverberated from the horizon, followed by a frightening heavenly sword chi directly falling towards Yishuan. If this attack was not blocked in time, it could actually kill him. Chapter 326. Who is being so vicious? Yishuan, escape quickly or this attack will kill you. Yi Mo shouted promptly. Yishuan snorted as a cold look appeared on his face. His hands emitted rays of golden light, and tore apart that heavenly sword chi. Who is this coward that attacks me from the shadows? Yishuan asked coldly, while his gaze was tightly fixed above the city wall. Above the city wall, stood several disciples with the true Martial University's emblem embroidered on their chests. They were releasing a murderous aura while looking towards Yishuan, with rays of cold light flashing in their eyes. It was me, do you have any complaints? Those disciples directly flew down from the top of the city wall. They were headed by a young man clad in a cyan robe. He looked very calm and confident, and had fairly handsome facial features. There was a divine look in his eyes. His oblique eyebrows stretched all the way to his temples, making him appear rather majestic. Do you want to die? Yishuan retorted coldly. Just then, a murderous aura suddenly surged towards him. Judging from that murderous aura, he could tell that the heavenly sword chi from a moment ago wasn't just a warning shot. Instead, this one was shot with the intention to kill him. Yishuan, you really are like the way rumors portray you, arrogant and despotic. Do you think that this place is some countryside like your southeastern region? You dare to threaten us law enforcement hall's disciples. This is far more serious than a first-grade crime, the cyan-robed young man spoke in a cold voice. Yishuan gawked for a moment since he had never thought that this person actually knew him. Although it didn't seem like that initially, the attack from a moment ago had actually been premeditated a long time ago. So, who could he possibly be? Yishuan had recently offended a lot of people, but this man was deliberately waiting for him here. It seemed as if the enmity he held within his heart wasn't little. Yishuan had killed too many people by now, and a lot of them had close relatives. However, he simply did not know who this person might have been related to. If you want to live, then you better leave, don't try to provoke me. Yi Shiwen stated coldly as he simply ignored that so-called law enforcement disciple. Many of the masters, standing in the background, were dumbstruck upon hearing this. It was hard to believe that Yi Shiwen would have actually dared to speak in this manner. Although the people who had come here were well-known geniuses, these enforcement disciples were no less. None of them were easy to deal with. They too had arrived here in the same manner, not long ago. The present of these law enforcement disciples was going to be the future of the new ones. If one would say that these geniuses had assembled like ants on the ancient road, then their reputation would basically become a joke after joining true martial university. Here, they wouldn't be considered anything more than mediocre. Warriors did not dare to be dissolute, regardless of whether their temperament was peaceful or irascible. Not just because there were as many experts in true martial university as clouds in the sky, but also because those experts were extremely strong. The might of true martial university's experts was not a very big deterrence for the new disciples. The newcomers knew that if they were to practice for a few hundred years, then their own achievements wouldn't be lacking. However, they had been restrained by the fear of those countless tyrannical seniors, and had ended up becoming indifferent. In short, they had silently restrained their temperaments. How could they be so overbearing and daring, like Yi Shiwen, and compete with law enforcement hall's disciples? Though they didn't really know how the true martial university was partitioned on an administration level, but an organization like the law enforcement hall could appoint several forces under their banner with authority enough to provide penalty, and also iron and blood. These forces were in charge of pedestrians' discipline within the city. I'm warning you. You better behave, and let us capture you. You will follow me to the law enforcement hall to receive punishment. Don't forget that true martial university is located here, that young man spoke coldly. Right at that moment, one after another, many other law enforcement disciples released their terrifying aura, which tightly shrouded Yi Shiwen from all sides. The bystanders suddenly started trembling with fear even though they were considered geniuses in their own merit. The overall might of these law enforcement disciples was too terrifying, far more tyrannical than their own. A series of vigorous and imposing auras swept across the surroundings, even the weakest being at a profound degree of half-step legendary 5th stage. In fact, majority of these auras were at half-step legendary small complete realm. However, the young head disciple had the cultivation level of legendary 6th stage. Moreover, he wasn't just an ordinary expert of legendary 6th stage, he was at its peak. None of the new disciples would dare to take the initiative of stepping forward when faced with this kind of lineup, even if there were some geniuses of half-step legendary realm hidden among them. The overall might of the opposite side was far beyond their reach. Everyone could feel their hearts trembling. Was this the true might of this university? They still had such strength, even though they seemed like ordinary disciples of law enforcement hall. Since that guy was an expert of the legendary realm, it seemed like he must have been unable to have a breakthrough within the half-step legendary realm. However, no one would laugh at people like him. The road of half-step legendary realm was difficult to tread on. Only a few could manage to persist till the very last stage. There weren't many who could obtain instant success. Before long, they would start to get anxious, not knowing where to advance to, or how long they should wait. In the end, they would make the decision to have a breakthrough to the legendary realm. Yi Shiwen. That's Yi Shiwen, right? He is so strong. No wonder that guy who tried to pass through the gate earlier couldn't stand up to him, spoke a disciple. It could be said that Yi Shiwen had started walking on this ancient road towards the end. His pace could also be regarded as very slow in comparison. Not to mention that he hung at the end of the last batch of disciples. However, his fame wasn't less. In fact, he could be regarded as an ominous yet illustrious figure of the younger generation. After all, not everyone could survive after being hunted by almost all the forces of the Great Ming and the Great Qin Empire. Moreover, he had continued to grow stronger all this while, and had slaughtered several of his pursuers. Yi Ziwen's fame had been thoroughly established after a few months of such slaughtering. Even though he was hanging at the end of the last batch, his glory had forged ahead at an incredible speed, even faster than his progress speed. A lot of masters had died at his hands on the three ancient roads located within the borders of the Great Ming Empire and Great Qin Dynasty. The most famed among them were the third, the fourth, and the fifth god. They used to be well-known young talents, and no one had thought that they would ultimately die at the hands of Yi Shiwen. They say Yi Shiwen has a page of ancient god scriptures, but I don't know whether that's true or false. Do you want to die? If not, you should give up on the idea of taking him on. Didn't you see what happened to that man a while ago? If you want to die, go die. Don't implicate us. Hee, these law enforcement disciples are certainly being unfriendly. They just want to test Yi Shiwen to see whether he really deserves his reputation. We will finally get to see some action. Why should I go with you? If you're a disciple of Law Enforcement Hall, you should speak out the rules one by one. Yi Shiwen replied indifferently. Humph. You dare to cause trouble in Xian City by disregarding the government rules, that young man spoke coldly. Being a newcomer, I am not aware of these so-called government rules you talk about. Moreover, that the place where I am standing right now, isn't within the bounds of Xian City. The city is on the other side of the gate. Yi Shiwen replied in a cold voice. Stop your nonsense, a disciple shouted in a somewhat impatient manner, and immediately began to advance towards Yi Shiwen. A sinister smile spread on his face as a divine beam appeared in his hand. It seemed as if he would crush Yi Ziwen's bones with his bare hands. You are overreaching yourself. Yi Ziwen's speed was even quicker as he shot his palm towards the incoming attack. Perhaps that disciple would have never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually dare to retaliate against him, a disciple of Law Enforcement Hall. Immediately, an explosion took place. Boom! Crunch! There was a loud crunching sound. That disciple's arm was broken in the explosion, and blood splashed out from it. Yi Shiwen took a step forward, instantly causing the space beneath his feet to collapse. He arrived in front of that disciple in the blink of an eye, and threw a kick. Stop! The head disciple roared the moment he saw that. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't possibly care. His kick landed on that disciple's chest, and instantly shattered his sternum. His body turned upside down, and was sent flying into the sky. You are quite courageous. That head disciple became furious. Yi Shiwen had crippled one of his subordinates in front of his eyes. This was nothing less than a slap in his face. Yi Shiwen sneered, your courage is fatter than mine. You first dared to launch a deadly sneak attack on a new disciple before his enrollment, and then you blame him for breaking the rules? After saying that, Yi Shiwen turned around to face those outstanding geniuses and said, everyone, we all are peerless geniuses of our respective regions, and have come here from far-off countries after facing countless hardships along the way. But for what? Is it not to excel and become successful? We are heroes and not stray dogs. You just heard that these people knew me, and deliberately come looking for trouble still. They had planned to intercept and kill me in front of such a huge crowd of new disciples at the main gate of Xian City. I don't know the rules of the true martial university, but I can say for sure that there isn't a rule that allows people like them to bully newcomers. How can such people hold the position of Law Enforcement Hall's disciples? If we enter true martial university and things remain like this, would there be even a hair of safety and security left to protect us? Do they have the right to be so rampant because they joined the university before us? We demand an explanation. How did they become law enforcement disciples? The disciples were just observing from the sidelines. This matter was of no concern to them. They were just enjoying themselves while watching an entertaining scene. They felt that Yi Shiwen was completely against the rules after hearing what he had said just now. So what? This had nothing to do with them. In fact, the party in question was actually creating trouble for Yi Shiwen, and some of the new disciples were just taking joy in Yi Ziwen's misfortune. After all, if Yi Shiwen were to get killed, then it would only mean one less rival in the future. However, Yi Ziwen's assertion had changed the situation entirely. If these seniors could dare to intercept Yi Shiwen so arrogantly outside the university, then there was a possibility that they themselves might face a similar fate someday. As rookies about to join true martial university, they lacked unity and strength of a group. Who would guarantee their safety if a senior blatantly attacked them for no reason? They were accustomed to living in a world where strength was revered. But it was not as if they couldn't question the legitimacy of some rules. One can choose to have a breakthrough directly from any stage of half-step legendary realm to the corresponding stage of legendary realm whenever they feel like. This is because continuing to have breakthroughs within the half-step legendary realm become almost impossible at later stages, and only super geniuses can proceed to higher stages of half-step legendary realm. Chapter 327. Yi Zaiwen's words had aroused a sense of urgency in everybody. Indeed, these people were considered the finest of geniuses in their respective regions. Their cultivation level was sufficient to run amok their natives. However, true martial university was the best institution of the southern region. Over here, they would find their cultivation levels lying at the bottom. They would get to join the university, but only as inner disciples, outer disciples, and so on. As a result, it would be impossible for the new disciples to be domineering from the beginning. Anyway, these outstanding geniuses weren't stupid. They were smart enough to know the facts. Such as one could only turn to rules for protection if one's strength was weaker. However, they would find themselves in a pickle if someone were to intentionally trample these rules. This would only mean that the formidable senior disciples could intentionally look for reasons, and could kill their weaker junior disciples. Then, who would ensure their safety? Yi Shiwen had as many enemies as hair on an ox, simply too many to count. However, the other new disciples had their fair share of foes. Everyone had killed and offended many people on their way to true martial university. Of course, none of them had kept account of enemies they might have made in the process. This matter wasn't just Yi Zaiwen's personal concern, for it was related to their safety as well. They would most likely be killed sooner or later if they couldn't abolish this rule. Hence, if they didn't come to his aid now, then who would support them later? Everyone understood the importance of the interdependence between two neighboring states when facing a common enemy. In just a matter of few breaths, everyone had decided to stand together with Yi Shiwen. As a result, the public sentiment soon swayed in his favor. That's right, we demand an explanation. What kind of a rule is this? Which government sets up an absurd rule that allows powerful seniors to attack its new disciples whenever they feel like? If that is the case, then we aren't some ordinary individuals either. You can't weed us out whenever you want. Right. We want an explanation, or there will inevitably come a day when no one will know how we died. We won't let it pass that easily. We will not let go of this matter until we get an explanation. The uproar at the city's gate attracted the attention of the disciples who were presently patrolling above the city's wall. They all gazed at the commotion, one after another. Isn't that Yan Wufang? What's he doing down there with the newcomers? I don't know, but it seems like he has gained perks from someone in return for making things difficult for Yi Shiwen. Hee, this is going to be fun. Didn't you see earlier how Yi Shiwen was intending to break through the barrier? He is definitely not a merciful guy. This is certainly going to be very interesting, ha ha ha. Indeed, most of these newcomers are rebellious, let alone Yi Shiwen. I guess we've all heard of his outstanding performance on the ancient road. Gee, he is not the type to stay idle and take the beating. Plus, these law enforcement disciples are the most rude and unreasonable bunch. It seems that the clash between these two groups is certainly going to be entertaining. The law enforcement disciples' faces turned ugly after the public sentiment shifted against them, head disciple Yan Wufang's being the worst. Initially, they had thought that it would be very easy to find a reason which could allow them to butcher Yi Shiwen. However, they hadn't imagined that Yi Shiwen would instigate a feeling of dissatisfaction within this crowd of new disciples. As the matter had developed, Yi Shiwen had been able to gain the public sentiment in his favor using just a few words. You've got a sharp tongue, Yi Shiwen. We are not here for the others. We just want you to accompany us to the law enforcement hall so you can receive a punishment for injuring a fellow disciple at the main gate of Xian City. Yan Wufang tightly clenched his teeth, while his razor-sharp gaze was directed towards Yi Shiwen. He was furious because Yi Shiwen had compelled him to give an explanation. However, his excuse was far from convincing for the new disciples. They were not speaking up for Yi Shiwen, but for ensuring their own safety in the future. Were their lives really so worthless that anyone could kill them on a whim? This explanation did not silence them, on the contrary, it made several of them angrier. Yi Shiwen, first you committed a heinous crime by injuring a disciple of the sect you're about to join. And now you're actually daring to resist the arrest. You are truly reprehensible. Yan Wufang spoke in a cold voice as his complexion paled. He was attentively watching Yi Shiwen. Don't you consider attempting to kill a new disciple a heinous crime? Is that the way law enforcement hall operates around here? Yi Shiwen sneered and asked. Shut up. Don't you dare think you can willfully slander the name of law enforcement hall, got it? Be prepared to die today. Those law enforcement hall disciples couldn't help it, and rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. They joined hands, and called forth the net of justice. It seemed as if this net was blotting out the sky covering the earth. In fact, it seemed as if the entire world had been brought under one umbrella. So long as someone was entrapped in this net, making an escape was impossible. This was an important device used by the law enforcement hall to capture the disciples who had committed crimes. This unusual divine tool was called Dragnet. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. His hands emitted golden rays of light as he advanced towards that inescapable net. Bang! The dragnet was grabbed by Yi Shiwen. A burst of divine rays appeared inside the net, and began exploding one after another. However, Yi Shiwen remained unscathed since these explosions only triggered ripples on his golden body. Rip! A massive sound of something being torn reverberated as Yi Shiwen ripped the dragnet was apart. Yi Ziwen's body was extremely overbearing, to the extent that the dragnet had been simply torn apart by his bare hands. Everyone was incomparably shocked. Especially those law enforcement disciples. The dragnet had never failed to capture its target, let alone getting ripped apart with bare hands. This Yi Shiwen was way too fierce. Humph! Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. A surge of golden energy rushed out of his golden body, and transformed into 10,000 sword ki. It then directly slaughtered those law enforcement disciples in one swoop. They screamed pitifully before transforming into blood fog. You dare to kill the law enforcement hall's disciples? Yan Wufang was already enraged to the peak. He had never thought that such a situation could arise since he was confident of killing Yi Shiwen. However, the outcome had been the complete reverse. These disciples would never have thought they would get killed instead, that too before laying a single finger on Yi Shiwen. Yan Wufang had been under the impression that they would murder Yi Shiwen without any problems, and no one would find out about it since the dead cannot testify. Also, who would bother to speak up for a dead man? However, he never expected that Yi Shiwen would turn out to be so ruthless. Yan Wufang released the terrifying energy of half-step legendary 6th stage. This energy soon spread in all directions. Yi Shiwen, do you realize what you have done today? Let me arrest you without a fight, I might still leave your corpse intact, and may even not implicate your family. Yan Wufang announced. So you're thinking of implicating my family as well, ah. A murderous intent could be seen exploding in Yi Ziwen's eyes. It soon spread out in the surroundings. Anyone who could contemplate such a thing, would be inviting the wrath of the emperor. This matter had already made him extremely angry. It was obvious that the opposing party had specifically showed up to get rid of him, in fact, they were even willing to go as far as involving his family. As it stood, Yan Wufang had effectively attempted to blackmail Yi Shiwen into subjugation. However, it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to capitulate without a fight. Well, aren't you a splendid law enforcement disciple? Yi Shiwen laughed. He hadn't expected Yan Wufang to be so arrogant. Humph! Yan Wufang sneered. He didn't say anything, and directly swept out a terrifying sword light. It seemed like a silver chain as it instantly advanced towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen roared, while his hands began to radiate waves of golden light. These waves condensed to form a terrifying beam of divine energy. Immediately after that, the incoming sword light was torn to shreds by Yi Ziwen's divine beam. Yi Shiwen, today you have dared to go against the law. You've also killed the disciples of Law Enforcement Hall. No one can save you now. You can give up on the idea of joining the true martial university since you're about to die. Yan Wufang shouted. I probably won't get myself enrolled if the true martial university shelters a generation of snakes, insects, rats, and ants like you and your buddies. Yi Shiwen sneered and replied. He was likely to depart in case the true martial university decided against giving them a formal explanation. There were more than just one or two enemies lurking in the university, simply waiting for his arrival. Hence, he obviously wouldn't join unless his safety was guaranteed, since it would tantamount to throwing his life away. Humph. Yan Wufang's expression turned even uglier after being insulted like that. A formidable aura swept out of his body, and spread into the surroundings. It seemed as if it would engulf everything. Being a law enforcement disciple, Yan Wufang was certainly strong. An unusual terror swept out of his body as he rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yan Wufang went all out, and issued a magnificent sword light. Suddenly, it seemed as if the entire sky had been beset with stars. His body emitted countless rays of starlight, which instantly blotted out the sky as they aggressively lunged towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! 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 It could be said that Yi Ziwen's palm strength was simply infinite. The golden divinities boiled within Yi Ziwen's body as those star lights were directly slapped to smithereens by his palm. The attacks from both sides were equally terrifying. If this battle had taken place elsewhere, the surrounding space would have exploded and broken into pieces. However, Yi Shiwen could feel that this expanse had been solidified to an unprecedented extent. So much so, that even a battle between two legendary-level experts couldn't break it. Even so, the aftermath of their clashes caused the air to vaporize. One could imagine the unconquerable terror of witnessing this battle up close. Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched this battle, the new and senior disciples alike. They hadn't anticipated that this battle would get this far. They were finding it difficult to believe this. Moreover, something happened, which left them panic-stricken. It hadn't taken long for Yi Shiwen to gain the upper hand. Yi Shiwen had thoroughly suppressed Yan Wufang's sword attack. So much so, that the incoming sword light had been rendered ineffective about 10 feet away from his body. In fact, it wasn't even able to explode as a result of the suppression. Everyone could see that Yi Shiwen had already attained a huge advantage in the fight. Yan Wufang was then smacked around by Yi Shiwen several times. He spat a mouthful of blood, while his complexion turned deathly pale. Chapter 328. Yi Ziwen's blank expression turned ice-cold. The killing intent could be seen in his eyes. Yan Wufang had crossed all the limits by threatening Yi Ziwen's family. This was something he simply could not tolerate. Bang! Yi Shiwen invoked the Han seal, and summoned a huge mountain which fell from the sky. There was scope for Yan Wufang to resist the attack. Bang! All the bones within his body appeared to have been completely smashed by this attack. How is this possible? Yan Wufang had no power to fight back. Who in the world is this Yi Shiwen? Looks like a tenacious fellow who very much wants to join the government office. These new disciples are quite fierce. They are not willing to bear even the slightest bit of grievances when they feel wronged. Their determination is higher than the sky. They are rebellious, and certainly cannot be tamed easily. Hee, this is not just about feeling wronged. If I were to come across this matter, then I would have also wanted to get hold of that Yan Wufang. I too would have wanted to slaughter him. However, I wouldn't dare to such a thing right before the main gate of Xian City. It can be said that Yi Ziwen's courage knows no bounds. Such assassination attempts happen every time the new disciples arrive, but the tables were turned this time. Those assassins died miserable deaths at the hands of their target. Well, all I can say is only the elites among the elites are able to survive till the end. Yi Shiwen, you'll regret if you kill me. Yan Wufang shouted as he stared coldly at Yi Shiwen. There was actually a hint of panic in his eyes since he hadn't expected for things to turn out this way. His ego had been shattered by Yi Shiwen. Moreover, he no longer had the strength to fight back. Yang Wufang had joined the university about a century ago, but the disparity between their strength levels was already quite huge. Not to mention, this gap was only going to widen in the future, until there would be no scope for comparison whatsoever. Such a person could become a huge threat to him once grown up. Yan Wufang's gaze somewhat flickered, and it seemed as if some schemes and tricks were revolving through his mind. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at him. He did not know what Yan Wufang was secretly planning, but he knew that Yan Wufang was up to no good. With an awe-inspiring killing intention, Yi Shiwen said, "It's too bad that you won't be around to see me regret." Yi Ziwen's killing intention surged up in a flash. At this time, Yan Wufang was worried since he had finally recalled that Yi Shiwen was a killing machine. His fellow law enforcement disciples had already been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen. It also seemed as if Yi Shiwen had already given up on the idea of entering true martial university, then why would he hesitate from killing one more? Law enforcement hall's disciples were usually very arrogant and domineering in nature. In fact, they didn't even get along well with the other disciples. It was no wonder that even when the other disciples were aware that Yan Wutian is in danger, they didn't come down from above the city wall to save him. Yi Shiwen, stop. Please let me go. I promise I will never come back to trouble you again. I will also give you big rewards and benefits. At this time, Yan Wufang was finally afraid. Do you really think that I will let you go? Yi Shiwen said lightly as his big golden hand flourished forward. He then grabbed Yan Wufang's neck. Go to hell, and regret your decision there. Stop. At this time, an old hoarse voice sounded out from the middle of Xian City. An old figure suddenly came out from the void. He had wrinkles on his face, and was dressed in black clothes. It's the city lord. How come the city lord himself has moved into action? This incident has made a huge noise, and even the Xian City's lord has been informed about it. I didn't expect that the mysterious city lord would arrive at the scene himself. He must have realized that this matter would go out of control. Yi Shiwen, regardless of the present situation, immediately shot his palm towards Yan Wufang, and killed him, as if he simply hadn't heard the words of Xian City's lord. Ha! The old city lord sighed, you are too reckless. Yi Shiwen seemed wary of that old city lord, and asked, don't tell that you are here to intercede in his favor? The old city lord shook his head and said, he is not worthy of my arbitration. However, it is such a pity, because you were such a fine young successor. The old city lord had a look of pity on his face. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt relieved after hearing that this old city lord, who had an unfathomable cultivation, was not here for backing Yan Wufang. Since this old man was extremely terrifying, Yi Shiwen had no choice but to maintain utmost vigilance. You possess a magnificent spirit. But you are way too reckless. The old city lord said, sometimes, it is not a bad thing to exercise forbearance, and take a step back. You also saw the situation clearly, didn't you? I was willing to step back, but they had put a sword to my neck. I would have died, had I not fought back. Yi Shiwen said. However, there is no doubt that you will offend groups of people in the university if you continue to carry such attitude, especially the people of Law Enforcement Hall. The old man's words had left many disciples dumbstruck since they were concerned about this matter. It could be seen that he and Yi Shiwen had never met before, but he still said such words of praise for Yi Shiwen. This indicated that the old city lord was very optimistic about Yi Ziwen's future. That must be the reason why he was having such a deep conversation with a stranger like Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen felt somewhat grateful in his heart. Who would go out of their way to praise a stranger? This also made Yi Shiwen to put down his hostility. If true martial university is all about such stuff, I would just leave as early as possible since I haven't yet joined it. Yi Shiwen said indifferently. He seemed quite tough and aloof in his stance. Ah. Forget about it. I am not handling this matter anyway, but sooner or later, the people of Law Enforcement Hall will come looking for you. The old man saw Yi Shiwen as a lofty and unyielding character. He didn't say much since he knew that Yi Ziwen's anger was not directed at him. Thank you for warning me, sir. Yi Shiwen said as he cupped his hands in obeisance. Good, but you must keep in mind that you cannot dispose of someone inside Xian City. Otherwise, you will be punished according to the government's rules. The old man said indifferently. It's a given. But what if it was in self-defense? Yi Shiwen asked since he was not usually the one to provoke others. He had certainly killed many masters on the way, but mostly in self-defense. He rarely took the initiative to stir up trouble. That will naturally have nothing to do with you, said the old city lord. Whoever stirs up the trouble shall be held responsible for it. Thanks a lot for reminding me, sir. Yi Shiwen said as he cupped his hands in obeisance again. You must keep on striving, okay? Your innate talent is extraordinary. Your future prospects will certainly be boundless if you manage to walk till the very end of the way of martial arts. The old city lord finished speaking. Then, his figure immediately disappeared in the void. This wasn't just fast speed, but genuine flash step. Yi Shiwen hadn't even stepped inside the Xian City, but had still attracted the attention of so many people. Not to mention that he had also stirred up the entire crowd of new disciples. He had dared to kill the law enforcement disciples at the main gate. Although the disciples of Law Enforcement Hall were wrongful in their approach, but Yi Ziwen's actions were still overly courageous. Yi Shiwen hadn't yet entered the city, but his fame had already spread throughout it. The disciples who had been patrolling above the city wall had already spread the news throughout the city. Moreover, the news also contained information about Yi Shiwen being praised by the mysterious city lord, for having boundless future prospects. Yi Ziwen's reputation had suddenly risen up. Yi Shiwen, go break through the array. Yi Mo said. Yi Shiwen nodded. After passing through this matter, he had become famous in the entire city, and had also attracted the attention of a lot of masters. Naturally, keeping a low profile had no significance anymore. Yi Shiwen moved towards the city gate, and those new disciples also followed after him, one after another. At this time, they didn't have any other choice except going inside along with Yi Shiwen. They obviously didn't wish to wait until the next day. As soon as Yi Shiwen entered through the gate, the entire scene around him suddenly changed. It seemed as if everything between the heaven and earth had disappeared. Yi Shiwen realized that he had stepped into an array. Whoosh! A puppet suddenly appeared before Yi Shiwen. Although it had a simply structure, it was exuding a terrifying aura towards him. It unexpectedly started to use proper fist technique to fire punches at him. Each of its punches was arousing the spirit ki, and directing it towards Yi Shiwen. This puppet had the strength of half-step legendary 5th stage. Bang! Yi Shiwen attacked with his palm, and a sound similar to a dragon's howl reverberated. Finally, his palm pounded on that puppet's wooden body. Yi Shiwen suddenly found out that he was unable to crush that puppet into powder like he had initially expected. Its body was merely broken into pieces. This puppet's toughness had gone far beyond his imagination. These puppets are made of special wood. They are even harder than the ordinary metal and stone. Yi Mo said. The martial heritage of true martial university was simply hard to imagine. They had actually used this level of treasure as stepping stones to test the strength of its disciples. There was always a way for 2 or 3 individuals to be able to cross over to the other side. However, it was hard to imagine how many of these puppets had been prepared for testing the strength of so many disciples who had walked on the ancient road before. I see. Yi Shiwen nodded. It was truly so, but he wasn't slow in changing his tactics either. He immediately covered his hands with golden divinities, and then shot his palm towards a wooden puppet. Bang! That puppet was instantly destroyed by Yi Shiwen. It would take time to explain the scene, but in fact, Yi Shiwen was moving extremely fast. None of the puppets who had jumped out in front of Yi Shiwen were any closer to being his opponents. He was emitting waves of golden divinities which were simply like an irresistible force sweeping away all those puppets. Regardless of their numbers, these puppets could not do anything to stop Yi Shiwen, and were smashed into pieces by him. Bang! Yi Shiwen lowered the emission of golden waves when he finally smashed the last puppet, and finally entered the city. Is that Yi Shiwen? He sure is eager to be first, ah. Those puppets of half-step legendary 5th stage simply didn't have the strength to fight back. His body is also very strong, strong enough to tear even gold and iron into pieces with bare hands. I have never come across such tyrannical body before. Other people have also passed this barrier before. But they've had to rely on various technique and magical powers to dash through the array, before crossing over to the other side. Yi Shiwen is the only one who was able to sweep away those puppets with his bare hands. Such a strong and capable disciple has arrived in this group of youngsters. Perhaps it is really going to be very lively around here now. They are all quite strong and capable. But I must say that there are a few people with special physical constitution. I heard there's a guy who has a titan's body, but I really cannot say if the toughness of his body can be compared with Yi Ziwen's. Notes. 1. Han seal, also referred to as Shaking Mountain Seal. Yi Shiwen had obtained this secret heritage from the Tomb Keeper. Whenever this seal is invoked, a huge mountain made up purely of energy appears in the sky. Then at Yi Ziwen's command, this mountain falls down upon its target. 2. Spirit Ki, also referred to as Lingqi, is actually the spirit energy present in the atmosphere. Chapter 329. We can't be sure. After all, this is the true martial university, and not the influence of some secluded regional territory. These geniuses aren't worth mentioning around here even if they used to be famous earlier. Hee, these new disciples look lively to me. Well, they must hurry up and go inside quickly. Tomorrow will be the last day for this term's enrollment for new disciples. Yi Shiwen directly entered the city. The Yingxian city was the only city to welcome the new disciples. No one knew the exact age of this city, or how much it had expanded over the time. It was large enough to accommodate 2 to 3 million people easily, at any particular time. However, at present, the warriors were arriving one after another from various ancient roads to join the university. They added up to no less than hundreds of thousands of people, plus those who had been selected earlier. All these added up to a total of over 1 million people. In addition, there were a lot of senior disciples who lived here all year round. On the whole, the Yingxian city looked somewhat crowded. Yi Shiwen looked for a guest house to stop over. In the city, all such inns were basically owned by some old disciples. They used truth-level outer disciples as waiters and attendants in the inn. Most of these truth-level disciples were usually at 5th or 6th stage. These disciples were the descendants of older disciples, who couldn't help, but married inside the true martial university. After several generations, these descendants wandered about destitute, they were basically stranded outside. In the end, they ended up becoming recorded name disciples of true martial university. In reality, the general population inside the true martial university was no different. Yi Shiwen had originally intended on finding Qi Fifan and the other fellow disciples from Yi Yuan school. However, he later heard that they had already chosen an inheritance, and had left for different places 1 year after their arrival in the university. Nowadays, a number of books on general knowledge of true martial university were being sold everywhere inside the city. Naturally, Yi Shiwen also bought a book, and finally developed an understanding of the entire foundation of true martial university after reading it. There was an endless stretch of sierra in the center of the true martial university. Magnificent mountain peaks continuously rose one after another. No one knew how many mountains had come together to form this mountain range. Every mountain had a mountain peak, and each peak represented an inheritance. After all said and done, no one knew how many inheritances actually existed in the university. In fact, no one really knew when this university was established. However, there had always been people who would step up to represent a peak's inheritance ever after its establishment. A majority of people could choose different inheritances according to their preferences in the beginning itself, apart from a few exceptions. Naturally, different inheritances had different strength level requirements. The mere names of the strong inheritances could make people's scalps go numb. However, fortunately everyone was a successful martial arts practitioner. Hence, one could figure out the exact strength level of an inheritance with just a sweep of soul search. And based on the assessment, one could make a choice. There were huge differences between each of the natural heritages associated with these various inheritances. Each of these inheritances had their individual secret heritage. Not to mention that there were large differences between these secret heritages. Some of these inheritances were very strong, while others were inferior. That is because some inheritances had been left behind by the powerhouses of past generations. Some of them had been left behind by sage-level powerhouses. Such inheritances were considered the weakest. In fact, more than 70% of inheritances were of this kind. In addition, a part of these inheritances had been left behind by great sage-level powerhouses. Such inheritances were considered relatively stronger than the others. However, the genuinely strong inheritances were the ones which had been left behind by the powerhouses who were even above the great sage level. These inheritances naturally had countless people rushing in to join, almost as if these disciples were on a wild goose chase. However, the strongest among all the inheritances were the so-called top 100 inheritances. That's because they were set up at the time of the university's establishment. No one knew how many powerhouses had emerged from these top 100 inheritances over the last innumerable years. Hence, only they could be considered as the strongest of inheritances. Over the past years, more than 70% of the powerhouses had emerged from these top 100 inheritances. However, these top 100 inheritances were also the ones that every disciple yearned for. These top 100 inheritances were surely very powerful, but their selection criterion was quite stringent as well. Unless a truth-level disciple did not fall in the category of peerless monstrous geniuses, they simply weren't allowed to join any of the top 100 inheritances. The minimum requirement was half-step legendary realm, that too after properly checking the talent of the disciple. An ordinary disciple was expected to at least have the cultivation of half-step legendary's third or fourth stage in order to enter these inheritances. In fact, some of the tyrannical inheritances in the group of top 100 inheritances only accepted disciples of half-step legendary's 6th stage or higher. Disciples of half-step legendary 5th stage or higher, and under the age of 50 were small in numbers. However, disciples of this level above the age of 50 were not small in numbers. In fact, every 3 out of 4 adults were at this level. Yi Shiwen looked for a window seat to settle down inside the liveliest hall of the inn. He stared blankly towards the distant street, and was soon lost in his own thoughts. The martial heritage of true martial university is really profound. It's simply far beyond my imagination. Comparing it with Yi Yuan School is simply like distinguishing between cloud and mud. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Even the pedestrians on the streets were experts of Truth Realm or higher. Naturally, the experts of Xiantian Realm and Hotian Realm were not allowed to pass through the city's gate. The name and fame of these geniuses didn't hold any value here. They were nothing more than a joke. Everything needed to be started from the scratch after arriving here. One needed to put both the hands at work, and strive to become successful again. Originally, Yi Shiwen had thought that the first thing he would do after arriving at the true martial university was to find Qi Fifan and the other from his school. Now, it seemed as if it was similar to finding a needle in a haystack. Moreover, they had already chosen their favorite inheritances, and had dispersed to their respective places. Therefore, finding them was easier said than done. And so he must wait till later to nurture himself, and make personal contacts to find their whereabouts. Although the true Marshall University was an educational institution, but it was more like a small country in reality. In fact, Yi Shiwen was quite glad that he chose to come to true Marshall University. Otherwise, he would have been similar to a frog at the bottom of the well, thinking that the world was only as big as its well. Well, you wouldn't have found the means to gain such experiences for a lifetime if you had continued to stay in the southeast region. Yi Mo said with a nod. These 2 days, the last group of new disciples has also arrived. Did you all see what happened yesterday? That person called Yi Shiwen broke his way into the city through the main gate. His has cultivated deeply. He at least has the cultivation of a half-step legendary small complete realm. He will probably become a core disciple after joining in. Yes. If he goes to some small inheritance, he will be treated as a true disciple who has come to train. Yes. Those of us who are nothing but the disciples of complete truth realm, we would be treated as outer disciples, even if we were to join a small inheritance. That is not bad, you know. We have the advantage since our age is not over 50 years yet. Otherwise, the truth-level disciples can only exist as registered name disciples. Not to mention that registered name disciples are equivalent to servants in the university. But we would still have an illustrious reputation outside, even if we are considered as servants in true Marshall University. Even the ordinary experts of legendary realm wouldn't dare to gesticulate while talking to us. Having the age of less than 50 years and still being able to reach complete truth realm, if these experts would be considered extraordinary if they were in the 10 countries of Southeast region. However, here, they could only be reduced to the rank of registered name disciples, and yet they still were secretly delighted. Yi Shiwen secretly pondered that even these so-called geniuses did not mention their qualifications in this top university of the southern region. In fact, only a few people dared to refer to themselves as geniuses. In reality, they all had become ordinary people. This time's fiercest and most powerful new disciples are those few ones with special physique. However, this is also very rare. What do you mean by special physique? How come I never heard of that? These extraordinary physiques are very rare, almost very difficult to find. Even I don't know exactly, but some new disciples with special fierce physiques have arrived sweeping all the way from the ancient road. They are completely unstoppable, and there are rumors that they will be chosen as true disciples, or even pro-disciples in the university. Are you talking about that guy with the Titan's body? I was present on the scene, and saw him with my own eyes. The city gate had collapsed upon nothing more than just a strike of his palm, while those puppets had been smashed to pieces. He had made a complete mess to pass through the gate. In addition, that one with Phoenix body had used a sea of fire to burn those wooden puppets, which couldn't even resist, and were directly reduced to ashes. So fierce. Good gracious, we have so many ferocious characters joining the university, how we will mix them. I just wanted to come to true Marshall University to flex my muscles. And here I am, almost reduced to the rank of a mere odd jobs disciple. The comparison between us and them is simply like distinguishing between mud and cloud. There is nothing to be discouraged about. Although those people with extraordinary physiques are ferocious, they are very few in numbers. The majority of new disciples are ordinary experts. In the past few days, the masters who have arrived are all ordinary masters, and they have run amok throughout their journey. These ordinary experts are also not inferior to those people. What are these special physiques? Do you know about them? Yi Shiwen asked Yi Mo in a low voice. Yi Shiwen showed a bit of interest toward those people with extraordinary physiques. Were these extraordinary physiques really so ferocious? I certainly do know about it. In common terms, it can be described as mutation. Every race has a certain mutation, and it is actually quite common. For example, some people are innately stronger than others since the day they are born. But, this kind of mutation has small scope. On the other hand, the mutation of those extraordinary physiques is substantial, and on a deeper level. Yi Mo further explained, for example, those with the mutation of a Titan's body, or our Devil World's famous Great Azura body and so on. However, these people are often quite ferocious in nature. The so-called martial practice generally depends on two innate factors. First is natural talent and the second factor is intelligence. A person who isn't intelligent cannot possibly comprehend anything. This is the general definition of a genius. The talent is deep-rooted in the very bones of these geniuses. Some people can naturally bridge their 100 arteries, and directly pass from the Ho-Tian realm to the Xian-Tian realm. Some people can naturally practice fire attribute power technique law at a very fast speed. From this comparison, one can see that the former type is very common, but the latter type is quite rare. And those with special physiques belong to the latter. However, if someone belongs to both the types, then that will be truly terrifying. Then they might become strong by unimaginable proportions, going far beyond common people's imagination. Notes. Small complete realm, this is a level that lies between 5th stage and 6th stage. It basically means that the expert is halfway through the realm. True disciple equals it's just a rank within the university. It has nothing to do with the cultivation level of truth realm. Outer disciples complete truth realm, this is a cultivation level that lies between truth 9th peak and half-step legendary realm. Truth 9th stage. Chapter 330. Yi Shiwen was amazed. There were two factors which defined the meaning of a genius. In fact, one factor was enough for an expert to stand out among his peers. Moreover, an expert who possessed both the factors had not yet emerged. If such an expert were to make an appearance, then they would be sure to become an overnight celebrity. Some mutations occur because of the flow of the blood of other races in one's body. For example, a person with a heavenly phoenix body must have the phoenix's blood running within the body. Yi Mo said. This kind of person is very difficult to deal with when he appears. However, you need not worry as your gilded tyrant form is not bad. If you practice it to the pinnacle level, then it will be sufficient to help you fight them. You may even surpass the very founder of this strange technique. Yi Shiwen nodded. His gilded tyrant form was indeed exceptional. Once he had crossed the first layer of the gilded tyrant form, he had almost perfected this technique himself. Even then, he didn't dare to claim credit for it. This was because for the successful practice of his gilded tyrant form, at least half the credit had to be attributed to the first layer of tyrant body technique. As they say, no matter how tall a building is, if its foundation isn't solid, then it would be nothing more than a shabby building built on soybean dregs. Yi Shiwen had merely patched the existing power technique. He hadn't really tried to create a power technique of his own. However, thanks to the gilded tyrant form, Yi Shiwen had never fallen into a disadvantageous situation when it came to his Buddhist toughness, except when he had to fight much stronger opponents. Otherwise, he would have often had an upper hand in the fights, thanks to his formidable gilded body. However, the emergence of these special physiques had made Yi Shiwen feel somewhat excited. Earlier, he hadn't known about the existence of people with special physiques. He only knew that the Great Azura body was considered to be the strongest body type in the devil world. He used to think that sooner or later, he would have to fight the devil with the Great Azura body. However, he had never thought that he would soon get an opportunity to fight people who had special physiques. Although those people have extraordinary physiques and are quite hard to deal with, it can be said that they are walking on a rather narrow road. If they cannot find an authentic road to follow, with an appropriate power technique to assist them along the way, then their so-called special physiques will go to waste. Moreover, they might even end up being inferior to us. Indeed, indeed. Even among those experts whose names can move the entire world, these people with special physiques are very few in numbers. In fact, the majority of them are ordinary people like us. The others agreed one by one to what had just been said. Even after knowing how powerful the people with special physiques could be, they still didn't want to give in to their awe-inspiring might. Yi Shiwen nodded. Although the people with special physiques were fierce, they were very few in numbers, possibly 1 in millions. No matter what, we are still going to sign up in the university. If we can pass the assessment, we will be able to progress as martial artists by using those big inheritances to our advantage. Those big inheritances are good, but I am afraid that if we enter them, we will have to start from the bottom level. In that case, will there really be any difference between us and those registered name disciples? It is better to join the small inheritances. I agree that they have been left behind by the experts of the sage realm. However, we will at least get to cultivate for the rest of our lives, until we enter the sage realm. Once that happens, we may even be regarded as the elite crop. Everyone had their own opinions. Yi Shiwen also felt somewhat dizzy after seeing so many inheritances. Each inheritance had its own background of considerable degree. In fact, it could be said that the backgrounds of most of these inheritances were far above Yi Yuan schools. Days passed one by one until 1 month had already passed in the blink of an eye. Most people had already found the inheritances that suited them. Only Yi Shiwen had not been able to find one. He had come across many suitable inheritances, but as soon as they would find out his identity, they immediately rejected him. Although his reputation among these new disciples was not the most dazzling one, it was still quite good. Except Yi Shiwen, almost all the new disciples who had burst through the city gate to enter it had been selected by tyrannical inheritances. Over time, Yi Shiwen also became thoroughly famous as someone with excellent aptitude, who was being shunned by the major inheritances. Slowly some rumors and slanders began to circulate among the new disciples. That Yi Shiwen is indeed unfortunate. Among the new disciples, he is easily among the top 100 incredible ones. In the past, he used to be regarded as a treasured individual, but now he is nothing more than a weed that nobody wants. This is not so because he has offended the members of the law enforcement hall, but rather because he killed a law enforcement disciple. That disciple was not really important, but by killing him, Yi Shiwen has invoked the wrath of the law enforcement hall. How will people dare to accept him now? Yes. The small inheritances cannot afford to offend law enforcement hall, and the big inheritances don't wish to offend them for just one individual. It is quite unfortunate for a talent like him. It is said that in his journey he has killed many arrogant masters all the way. He certainly wouldn't have thought that his fate would be to end up like this. However, the fact is that the members of law enforcement hall are wrong. These people intercepted a new disciple like Yi Shiwen at the Xian city gate in order to kill him. If he had died an untimely death, then shouldn't one ask them for an explanation? How is that not unreasonable of them? Humph. These law enforcement hall's members have always been oppressive and tyrannical. They wield the laws of true martial university. Those who obey the laws will prosper, and those who try to go against them will die. An ordinary person cannot dare to annoy them, or they would forever be on bad terms with the law enforcement hall. This time they didn't act against Yi Shiwen because Xian City's lord acted as his guarantor, or the law enforcement hall would have captured and executed him on the spot. However, the members of the law enforcement hall have still managed to make it impossible for Yi Shiwen to join any inheritances. I must say that their management power is quite amazing. If things go on like this, Yi Shiwen would sadly have no choice but to leave. Excuse me, young disciple Yi, but you do not meet the criteria on which we are recruiting new disciples. Precious jade and stones were used to pave the main mountain road. The dense fog was emitting a faint light, and together with the spiritual energy, it made the entire mountain range seem like paradise on earth. Yi Shiwen walked up the stone steps and then down. His countenance showed indifference. One simply couldn't tell that he had been rejected once again. The people in the surroundings were looking strangely at him, as they couldn't tell whether he was happy or sad. Their gazes didn't affect his mood either. These people are simply lower than dogs. This true martial university is no big deal. Yi Mo said indignantly. He favored Yi Shiwen and had also selected Yi Shiwen to become the next devil. However, even a small inheritance was not willing to take him in. This was a matter of extraordinary shame and humiliation for Yi Mo. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything in response. When he had been rejected for the first time, he had felt anger. At present, he was just calm and indifferent. This month had been enough for him to think a lot of things through. The law enforcement hall truly had great influence inside True Martial University. The true extent of their power was hard to imagine. No wondering Xian City's lord had such a sorry look on his face. However, if given the opportunity, he would choose the same path once again. He would change nothing. If he started flinching at the first sight of a small bit of difficulty, then his path would never improve. Experts faced many difficulties on their way. They had to firmly hold on to their beliefs in order to overcome all the obstacles on the way and move forward with conviction. Yi Xuan descended from the mountain peak and moved on to another. In contrast to the mountain peak from a while ago, which had a jade pavement and magical energy floating in the air, this mountain peak looked fairly mediocre. The road going uphill was neither renovated nor maintained. One could see that weeds had piled up on the road all the way to the hilltop. This was because no one bothered that the entire road was submerged in weeds all year round. No disciples could be seen flying around in the sky here, unlike other peaks. All these things were indicated that this peak had already declined. Yi Xuan is climbing the hidden star peak. Seeing Yi Xuan set foot on this ancient peak, a lot of people became suddenly concerned about this unusual turn of events. Hidden Star Peak. Are you talking about the Hidden Star Peak which has been hanging at the end of the top 100 inheritances for countless years? Yes, I am talking about that Hidden Star Peak. But, I have heard that the Hidden Star Peak used to be extremely rich and powerful once. However, the experts of the Hidden Star Peak later put together their main forces and fought a hard war with foreign beings. The war resulted in the demise of all the experts. This triggered the decline of Hidden Star Peak. The Hidden Star scriptures were also lost after the war. Without the Hidden Star scriptures, the Hidden Star Peak naturally declined with time. For thousands of years, it has managed to barely hang at the end of the top 100 inheritances. Although it is still counted in the top 100 inheritances, perhaps its background is no more than that of an ordinary inheritance. In addition, the temperament of all the disciples on this peak is eccentric. It's not advisable to provoke them. But I think that this trip of Yi Xuan will also go in vain. The Law Enforcement Hall has already announced that whoever recruits Yi Xuan shall be offending them in the process. The Hidden Star Peak declined countless years ago, and is unlikely to offend the Law Enforcement Hall for the sake of Yi Xuan. As far as these comments were concerned, Yi Xuan had turned a deaf ear to them long ago. Earlier, he had read through the information booklet and learned about the Hidden Star Peak as well as its location. If the Hidden Star Peak didn't possess such a glorious history, then he would never have shown any interest in it. Yi Xuan was naturally proud. He carried several exceptional inheritances which had secretly been transmitted to him. Every one of them was sufficient to turn into a peak-level inheritance in its own. The ordinary inheritances couldn't attract his attention at all. The Hidden Star Peak was his final stop. If he failed to get accepted here as well, then he would choose to leave True Martial University. Not to mention that those small inheritances would most likely also choose not to offend the Law Enforcement Hall. Yi Xuan followed along a dirt road to go uphill through a meadow. This road was not paved with jades or precious stones. He could tell that nobody had taken care of this road in a very long time. It was not hard to tell that there weren't many disciples in the Hidden Star Peak. From the looks of it, he noticed that this peak didn't even have odd jobs for disciples for maintenance. Almost everywhere along the sides of the road, one could clearly see the ruins of magnificent houses, which had apparently belonged to the disciples of the Hidden Star Peak during its golden age. According to the provisions of the True Martial University, besides the members of a particular inheritance, only a few of the elite disciples were allowed to live on the main peak. A majority of the disciples were supposed to live in the huge city surrounded by True Martial Mountain Range. Within the city, many inheritances had their own designated areas where their disciples used to practice. However, the Hidden Star Peak was left with only 2 or 3 disciples, and even they did not wish to live on the main peak. They had no choice but to live in the city. Chapter 331. Yi Xuan was walking up the peak step by step. One couldn't refrain from flying inside the true Martial University, because one's legs would break if one tried to walk to travel inside the huge university. However, this was the only time when it was considered necessary to walk with absolute sincerity in one's heart. Yi Shiwen ascended in light steps, and when he reached the top, a young man suddenly came to stand in front of him. He was roughly over 20 years of age. His eyebrows were straight and slanted upwards. His gaze was as sharp as a sword and his eyes resembled stars. He was tall and handsome. The heroic spirit thrived upon this person, as was visible from his facial features. He was clad in a white robe and appeared quite carefree and at ease. "Are you Yi Shiwen?" the man asked. "Yes," Yi Shiwen nodded. "Come with me." The man didn't say any words of rejection. This made Yi Shiwen feel relaxed, and he heaved a sigh of relief. "I am Bai Jian Song. I am the third disciple of this generation of Hidden Star Peak. Now, you are also a disciple of our Hidden Star Peak. There are 2 more disciples who had arrived earlier than you," Bai Jian Song said. "Nice to meet you, third brother." Yi Shiwen cupped his hands in greetings and asked in astonishment, "Isn't there any need of assessment?" "What kind of assessment?" "We only have a few people. If we were to take an assessment, there would be nobody left. Out of so many people who join the true Martial University, where will the inferior talent go? Many peerless geniuses come out of small regions and the ones with good aptitude are chosen among the top picks." Bai Jian Song didn't hide anything. He was not worried that Yi Shiwen would be scared away. Who in the entire true Martial University didn't know about the current situation of Hidden Star Peak? It could be said that there was nothing good to hide in the first place. Long ago, a large number of disciples used to arrive at the Hidden Star Peak every term. The reason was quite simple. Although Hidden Star Peak could be said to have declined many years ago, its heritage was Hidden Star Scriptures, after all. It was considered the finest power technique of true Martial University. So much so that once upon a time, someone had become an invincible character after practicing the Hidden Star Scripture, and was ranked among one of the best of true Martial University. During its strong time, the Hidden Star Peak was ranked one among the top 10 great inheritances and was known to have wealthy and illustrious big shots. However, a lot of experts died in that war, which laid the seeds of its decline at a very fast speed. Originally, however, only a few people had practiced this top-notch power technique. Those people collectively died and as a result, the Hidden Star Scripture was severed from the inheritance. However, the Hidden Star Scripture still had a chance of reappearing, because it was believed that the Hidden Star Peak had a star-gazing cliff on its top. One could actually see the traces of an almighty martial principle, left behind since ancient times on this cliff. It was said that the founder of the Hidden Star Peak had obtained enormous inspiration from these traces. Afterwards, he had formed the Hidden Star Scripture. The existence of this star cliff was an indication that some people still had the opportunity to comprehend the Hidden Star Scripture. As a result, a lot of people used to arrive on this peak, only to leave in disappointment in the end. Then slowly everyone lost their interest in the Hidden Star Peak, because the other prominent peaks didn't exactly have inferior power techniques in comparison to the Hidden Star Scripture. Moreover, there was no guarantee that after thousands of years of dormancy, they would be able to readily comprehend it one day. So why would they want to join the Hidden Star Peak just for the Hidden Star Scripture? As a result, each generation of the Hidden Star Peak only had 2 to 3 disciples. In the most miserable times, the peak would only have one disciple as their sole descendant. Yi Shiwen looked at the third brother Bai Jian Song. His aura was restrained, yet unfathomably profound. A transcendental aura was overflowing from his body in the surroundings. Yi Ziwen's pupils suddenly contracted. This kind of aura was not of the sage realm, but was actually of the half-step sage realm. With this kind of cultivation, he could become a powerful figure in a small inheritance. Although the Hidden Star Peak was known to have declined many years ago, it was clearly much stronger than his imagination. The opposite party was merely 2 realms ahead of him, but his cultivation had already reached such a tyrannical point. This was simply hard to imagine. Third brother, I have offended the people of Law Enforcement Hall. I am afraid that it will also bring some trouble to you. Yi Shuwen decided to tell the truth. If we are not afraid of them, then what are you afraid of? Law Enforcement Hall, humph, for all those years, they have been too arrogant and have overstepped their bounds. They have enslaved many of university's disciples to devote their lives to them. Their fate is indeed dark. Bai Jian-song said. Since you have joined the Hidden Star Peak, you have become a disciple of this peak. If the Law Enforcement Hall's members dare to come here looking for you, they will definitely be courting death. Bai Jian-song opened his mouth and faintly released a tyrannical aura in the surroundings. He had an invincible self-confidence. Yi Shuwen speculated that this third brother perhaps was not an ordinary person. Since you have joined us, I must tell you the rules of the Hidden Star Peak. Our rules are quite simple. You are not allowed to deceive the teachers and you are not allowed to injure the disciples of the same peak. Apart from this, we will not mind anything you do. Bai Jian-song explained. Presently, the Hidden Star Peak has 6 disciples including you. If you count the master, we are 7 people altogether. Yi Shuwen smiled wryly. The Hidden Star Peak did really have only a few disciples. They were so small in number that altogether there were only 7 people. Basically, it could only be considered a mini martial arts sect. The eldest brother was the first one to arrive on this peak. He has been following Master since childhood. The second to join was a female disciple. She is our second sister called Lu Yanlan. She is currently undergoing closed-door training. Since the eldest brother and master are not present, and second sister is busy training, thus all the matters of the Hidden Star Peak are being handled by me now. Under me is your 4th brother Yang Wen-jun and your 5th sister Deng Shui-xian. They arrived before you. Bai Jian-song gave the complete introduction of the peak and as expected, there were not too many people. It was a bit pitiful. Yi Shuwen followed by Jian-song and both of them quickly arrived at the crest of the Hidden Star Peak. 2 individuals were already waiting there. One of them was clad in a colorful robe and was a bit taller than Yi Shuwen. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and there was a smile on his square face. Beside him was a young woman of almost 20 years of age. She was clad in a green long dress and her skin was fairer than snow. Her pointed chin and her small curved eyebrows were complementing her beauty. Her big watery eyes made her look extremely cute and charming. Yi Shuwen understood that they must be the 4th and the 5th disciples Yang Wen-jun and Deng Shui-xian. 3rd brother, is he our new young disciple? Very good. I am not the youngest one so you cannot order me to do anything. Deng Shui-xian had a tender gruff smile on her small face. She looked somewhat excited. You talk as though we order you around all the time, Yang Wen-jun said, somewhat helplessly. It is nice to meet you, 4th brother and 5th sister, Yi Shuwen said as he cupped his hands in greetings. He saw that they were not bad at heart, and he therefore formed good opinions about them. The cultivation of his 2 fellow disciples was not shallow either. They must have been at the peak of Legendary's 9th stage, and soon would step into the half-step sage realm. Then their cultivation would become extremely tyrannical. Well, you will have plenty of time to talk later. Now at first, I am going to find the star-gazing cliff with the 6th brother. Bai Jian-song said, interrupting Yi Ziwen's train of thoughts. With Bai Jian-song leading the way, Yi Shuwen proceeded towards the sacred land of the Hidden Star Peak where the star-gazing cliff was located. The entire Hidden Star Peak once used to thrive because of this cliff. The star-gazing cliff looked similar to any other ordinary cliff. However, Bai Jian-song said, we cannot see any clues during the daytime. We will have to wait till the evening. I am sure that this star-gazing cliff will change at that time. Just when the evening was nearing, the curtain of night fell to completely cover the earth. A burst of stars' power illuminated in the sky and was unexpectedly absorbed by the face of the cliff. At this time, the face of the star-gazing cliff began to change slowly before Yi Ziwen's eyes. It gradually began to look different from before. The silhouette of a person began to sway, and it appeared as if an expert was practicing some kind of peerless martial arts. Also, it seemed as if someone was chanting the sutras to explain the world's most exceptional mysteries. Yi Shiwen gradually became lost in thoughts, and his mysterious space began to operate crazily. Yi Shiwen immediately began to break down the truth and reasoning behind the evolution, which was being projected upon the face of the star-gazing cliff. Bai Jian-song was standing nearby and actually saw Yi Shiwen falling into a meditative state, as if trying to comprehend the essentials. He was surprised. One must know that the star-gazing cliff had been standing erect over here for God knows how many years. It was hard to tell till when it would remain like this. However, even after so many years, the comprehension of the hidden star scripture from the star-gazing cliff had always been a part of the legends. Most people perceived this cliff as a piece of mountain that shone in the night and nothing more. The hidden star peak was considered as a broken inheritance because besides the first generation's founder, no one had been able to comprehend the hidden star scripture from the star-gazing cliff. The hidden star peak had remained in decline for so many years. But finally, the peak's master had arrived. He had slowly started restoring a portion of the hidden star scripture little by little. However, even after all these years of effort, the hidden star peak only showed a little improvement. The eldest disciple was also able to comprehend a part of the hidden star scripture with the help of the star-gazing cliff. These two men had tried their best to restore the hidden star scripture. They would mutually verify with each other and join the broken parts of their own comprehension. They believed that the day was not very far when the hidden star scripture would be completely restored. Now it turned out that the sixth disciple of the hidden star peak was capable of comprehending the traces of martial arts on the star-gazing cliff. Could it be that the heavens had decided to return the glory to the hidden star peak after innumerable years? Bai Jian-song could not control the excitement on his face after he saw this. How many geniuses had been able to comprehend the star-gazing cliff before? Was this an indication that something big was about to happen? Bai Jian-song immediately sat down cross-legged near Yi Shiwen. He laid out a protective barrier so that no one would disturb Yi Shiwen while he comprehended. This kind of an opportunity to comprehend principles was rare. In fact, most people would never get this type of an opportunity in their lifetime. It was entirely dependent on one stroke of luck. However, Bai Jian-song was not aware of the existence of the mysterious space in Yi Ziwen's mind. Thanks to the existence of the mysterious space, Yi Shiwen could continue to comprehend unceasingly. As far as Yi Shiwen was concerned, his mysterious space was just helping him in comprehending principles. This was not a huge mystical matter for him. As long as there were sufficient spirit dawn, there would be no problem at all. At this time, stars were forming and exploding one by one inside Yi Ziwen's mind. It was just like the Big Bang of the universe, an unceasing cycle of life and death. During the birth and death of these stars, Yi Ziwen's comprehension of the star power continued to increase slowly. Yi Shiwen is in half-step legendary realm. The third disciple is in half-step sage realm. Yi Shiwen needs to jump 2 realms to reach the third disciple's level. Chapter 332. Stars were taking birth and exploding at the same time. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen had placed himself in a huge universe where he appeared so tiny. Yi Shiwen was so tiny in this huge universe, that he was like a grain of dust particle drifting with the flow, while the stars seemed to be exploding on his sides. It seemed as if something had exploded inside Yi Ziwen's mind. He was having some sort of enlightenment, and the mysterious space was operating crazily. The loud sound of chanting scriptures almost perturbed the soul and consciousness of Yi Shiwen. However, he kept reading aloud patiently in his mind. For an ordinary person, it was impossible to maintain this deep-seated state of enlightenment for so long. This kind of state simply could not be sustained. The sound of chanting scriptures was quite fuzzy. One had to listen carefully many times in order to have only a vague understanding. This was also the reason why the Hidden Star Peak's master and the eldest disciple had been enlightened before. However, they didn't know any way to confirm that what they had heard was correct or not. In order to find out the correct version of the scripture, they had to mutually verify and proofread the outcomes of each other's comprehensions. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He could be in the perfect state of enlightenment for a long time. As long as there was enough chance for him to stick to doing it, the mysterious space could unceasingly analyze those traces of martial arts for him. At this time, certainly, the consumption of the spirit energy had also reached an astonishing level. Almost every second, he had to consume 10 spirit dawn. At this consumption rate, even the amount of spirit dawn that he possessed would not have lasted for too long. Considering Yi Ziwen's cultivation, the hidden star scripture was extremely profound. He didn't have the means to comprehend most of it. Presently, he was feeling quite agitated. The unknown silhouette of the Almighty Senior had been constantly repeating the same scriptures over and over again in front of him. It was not clear or completely remembered since how long Yi Shiwen had been listening to the same scriptures over and over again. He also realized that it was perhaps the complete version of the hidden star scripture. Moreover, it was comparable to the complete version which had been comprehended and practiced by the founder of the hidden star peak. Yi Shiwen was not aware of what exactly lay in the original hidden star scripture that had been handed down in the very beginning, but he also knew that apart from him, no one else could stay under this high-intensity epiphany for such a long time. Although Yi Shiwen had a feeling that that fuzzy figure was chanting scriptures for him, it was nothing but a futile attempt. The recited text was full of vague concepts and even remembering one sentence would be considered pretty well. In addition to this, there were many ambiguous spots in it. Yi Shiwen didn't know how many times he had listened to the scriptures and how many times the mysterious space had analyzed them. Only after that, he dared to be certain that he had heard the final version. As for the comprehension of the hidden star scripture, Yi Shiwen finally came up with a preliminary concept. This hidden star scripture must be an extraordinary power technique left behind by an almighty being which utilized the great cycle of the world and the universe to draw the power of the universe. Then, it would use the power of the universe to temper and refine oneself every day and every night. It was an unusually extraordinary practice. If practiced to the deepest level, with just a gesture of one's hand, one could break the universe or cause the stars to explode. It was so very terrifying. Certainly, this was the complete version of the hidden star scripture, otherwise it would be impossible to practice it to such an extent. While Yi Shiwen was continuously listening to the hidden star scripture and getting clearer insights, on the outside the power of the stars had begun to gradually shine upon Yi Ziwen's body from the night sky. It had spread out a layer of silvery white cloth on his body. With Yi Ziwen's comprehension of the hidden star scripture nearing completion, the power of the stars in the sky was rising crazily and was frantically illuminating his body. His body had absorbed the starlight which had slowly taken the shape of a gigantic storm. The power of the stars had condensed to form a storm. Bai Jian was startled as he saw this strange form of Yi Shiwen. He couldn't understand what had just happened to produce such a loud noise. He quickly laid out a huge enchantment barrier to cover Yi Shiwen from all sides, not allowing the strange form from divulging. Immediately, he felt a burst of ecstasy because he could see that Yi Shiwen had clearly comprehended the hidden star scripture. It was only possible to draw out the power of the stars which was crazily illuminating upon him after one had practiced the hidden star scripture. Since Yi Shiwen had comprehended the hidden star scripture, he was hoping that now it would be possible to restore its full version with his help. He didn't know that Yi Shiwen had not only comprehended the hidden star scripture, but also that his comprehension had been more complete and esoteric than that of the founder of the hidden star peak. Bai Jian remained silent and didn't dare to disturb the comprehension process of Yi Shiwen. However, he was very delighted. For Yi Shiwen, the hidden star scripture had an enormous reference value. However, this was not the road that he must take. The hidden star scripture would help him in accumulating experience to the utmost. It could allow him to borrow the strength of the heavens to run amok. He could be fearless and exceptional, but his limitless path of hegemony was in conflict with it. Because the road on which Yi Shiwen was walking required his body to be strong until he could break all the shackles, to achieve the supreme existence. In other words, the hidden star scripture would follow the path of primordial spirit method, whereas Yishuan used corporeal body method. These two methods were entirely different. Although the hidden star scripture also had a method to temper one's body using the power of the stars, it was in the final phase of the primordial spirit method. For other people, perhaps it could be said that they didn't have any relation with this method because they could not come in contact with a matter of this level. However, for Yishuan, it was only a matter of choice. Although Yi Mo was only a spirit, he had followed his master for far too long and knew a lot of things. Most of these things would be considered extremely mysterious for others, but it was casual for Yi Mo to know all this. Under Yi Mo's influence, Yishuan had come to know about a lot of things which were simply unknown to other people. In the distant past, there used to be a powerful group of cultivators. They used primordial spirit method to realize the heavenly law. Ultimately, they placed their own primordial spirit above the heavenly law in order to achieve immortality. However, they had vanished a long time ago, and at least were considered rare in Zhenwujie. They were replaced by the rising martial experts, who walked on a completely different road. Those cultivators saw the entire universe as one circle. Moreover, they integrated themselves with the heavenly law to become a part of it. What they practiced was a completely different method. The martial warriors used another method in which they viewed their own corporeal body as a small circle to become a small universe themselves. Although the complete version of the hidden star scripture was extremely powerful, it was an entirely different path for Yishuan. It was a path that Yishuan could not choose. Yishuan, this is a superb opportunity. You are in this rare state of enlightenment. Yi Mo said. If you don't want to practice the hidden star scripture, then I suggest you take the advantage of this opportunity to create your own power technique. Yishuan knew what Yi Mo was trying to say. In fact, Yishuan had been practicing the bright jade technique from the beginning until now. It certainly was not the original version of the bright jade technique. Rather, he had been constantly strengthening it for such a long time that it had already changed beyond recognition. Yishuan regarded the bright jade technique as a valued, fair and honest technique in his arsenal. No matter which power technique he practiced, all of them were incorporated inside the orbit of the bright jade technique. Although Yishuan had learned several secret techniques, including those belonging to non-human races as well, he could wander freely without any inconvenience, thanks to the tolerant nature of the bright jade technique. Yishuan had practiced a lot of power techniques which were incomparably overbearing. If not for the harmonious nature of the bright jade technique, it would have been difficult for him to manage his injuries. This was the reason why, even though he had obtained a lot of opportunities to practice even more formidable power techniques, he hadn't budged from his choice. However, the bright jade technique was too low a starting point. It was merely a Xiantian level power technique. When the starting point itself was too low, even strengthening it further wouldn't work well. In fact, he had slowly become unable to keep up with Yizaiwen's pace. He had finally become aware that the bright jade technique was merely a water jar. No matter how much effort was put to strengthen it, it could never become an ocean. It had been dragging down the pace of his progress. It was time to change it for good. In the outside world, the day had already received the first glimmer of light. The starlight had also gradually dissipated in the sky. The power of the stars which had assembled frantically had also disseminated gradually. However, Yizaiwen's strange form actually hadn't reduced even a bit. On the contrary, it changed once again. Originally, only the power of the stars was being absorbed by him. However, right now, a cosmic aura was overflowing from his body. He was no longer absorbing the power of the stars. On the contrary, his body was actually emitting out the power of the stars. Yizaiwen's body started emitting more and more powerful rays of light. His entire body began to appear like a huge star that was emitting endless rays of light, as if illuminating the entire universe. Yizaiwen's imposing aura surged up and finally reached the peak. At this time, the protective barrier which had been laid out by Bai Jiansong somewhat trembled, and Yishuan suddenly opened his eyes. Finally, it's complete. Observing person scripture first layer. Inside Yi Zaiwen's dantian, a small dazzling sun was floating calmly and was illuminating his entire dantian. Zhenwu Jia is the name of the continent this story is currently based in. Bright Jade Technique A.K. A Mingyu technique was the first power technique practiced by Yi Shiwen. Please check the first few chapters to learn more about it. Chapter 333. Originally, Yi Zaiwen's dantian had been pitch black. However, now it was radiating more sunshine than the sun itself and illuminating his entire dantian. It seemed as if the rays of light had given birth to the primal chaos inside his dantian. If Yi Zaiwen's dantian had been a universe, then this sun would be the center of it. It would also be at the origin point of that universe. The observing person scripture was Yi Zaiwen's own creation. The observing person scripture observed one's own human body as the supreme universe. For a long time now, a saying existed among the experts that the human body was like a small universe. However, nobody really tempered their body to form a small universe. However, Yi Shiwen dared to do so at once. After comprehending the hidden star scripture, he came up with a crazy idea to give frantic rise to his understanding of the entire universe. He thought of establishing a universe within his body by tempering his corporeal body, considering it a small universe. This really was a crazy idea. However, when Yi Zaiwen's deduction of the observing person scripture had been completed after an entire night, he finally detonated his dantian. Just like the massive explosion during the Big Bang of the universe, a rift had been torn open in his dantian along with the creation of a scorching sun. The small universe within Yi Zaiwen's body was actually the starting point. Later, along with the observing person scripture, he would have a continuous improvement and unceasing breakthroughs. The small universe within his body would also become more and more perfect and transform into a galaxy, nebula, and universe, and finally, it would evolve into a true universe. The observing person scripture might also become a stunning ancient scripture later on. However, the observing person scripture was still in its embryonic stage right now. Everything about it was still unknown. The theory of Yi Zaiwen's body turning into a small universe and his own comprehension of the hidden star scripture had finally come together to form his own thing. The hidden star scripture had many things which were worthy enough to be used as references by Yi Shiwen. In addition, the method of drawing power of the heaven and earth to temper as well as refine one's own corporeal body was also worthy of being used as a reference. The power of these stars could also be accumulated for the nourishment of his gilded tyrant form. Although Yi Shiwen could not walk on this path, he could still use many of these things as a reference. It could be said that Yi Shiwen had benefited a lot this time. This was the first time he had fully confirmed the path he had to take. Although it had been quite difficult to determine this direction, he would certainly overcome all the obstacles to forge ahead. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and found Bai Jian Song looking at him, seeming pleasantly surprised. Bai Jian Song said, "Sixth brother, you were comprehending the hidden star scripture, weren't you?" Yi Shiwen nodded, not trying to hide anything. His real secret was not the hidden star scripture, rather it was the observing person scripture. Although the observing person scripture had not been completed yet, he was confident that he would continue to improve it. The ancient sages had created earth-shattering ancient god scriptures in the past, and now he could too. Great! Now we have 3 people on the hidden star peak who can comprehend the hidden star scripture. That day is not far when the hidden star scripture will be completely restored. Bai Jian Song received Yi Zaiwen's affirmative. He was pleasantly surprised. Earlier, from generation to generation, some people had managed to comprehend the hidden star scripture little by little. They had amended it gradually, which had ultimately led to the prosperity of the hidden star peak. The hidden star scripture was a great fundamental principle of the hidden star peak. Because it had gone missing, the peak had been hanging at the end of the top 100 inheritances for such a long time. Now it was only known as a small inheritance with only a few disciples. I have already sent the message to inform Master and the eldest brother, Bai Jian Song said. After hearing Bai Jian-song's explanation, Yishuan came to know that the Hidden Star Peak's master and the eldest disciple had gone to the foreign battlefield, where their predecessors had been nearly wiped out in a war. They had hoped to find clues regarding the Hidden Star scripture that those predecessors might have left behind. In fact, this step had also been taken by the Hidden Star Peak's masters of the previous generations. However, there had been only a little progress so far. Sixth brother, by mutually verifying your version of the Hidden Star scripture with ours, the restoration of the Hidden Star scripture will advance quickly. Bai Jian-song said. Yishuan saw that Bai Jian-song was wholeheartedly devoted towards the Hidden Star Peak. The smile on his face was not artificial, and Yishuan immediately began to admire him in his heart. The eldest brother should be back after the completion of your newcomers trial big competition. Bai Jian-song said. Newcomers trial big competition? Yishuan asked. Yes, that's right. Bai Jian-song said seriously, the newcomers trial big competition is very important for every peak because the performance of the new disciples decides the amount of resources every peak will get. The more brilliantly you perform, the more resources we will get. Hehe, this time we have picked up a great deal at quite a cheap price. We will make good use of your innate talent, which is absolutely sufficient to place you among the top 100 disciples. If they don't have innate talent like yours, then it's their loss. Bai Jian-song said, smiling mischievously. In fact, since only less than a month is left for the competition to start, you must also begin preparations. Also, beware of the young brats of the law enforcement hall. They must be plotting against you. Bai Jian-song said. Judging by their disposition and how they seek revenge even for the slightest grievance, they will certainly come for you. Understood, Yishuan nodded. It was needless to say that if the disciples of the law enforcement hall tried to create trouble for him, he would also not stay silent. This newcomers trial big competition will take place in the foreign territory. The foreign territory is a place located outside the bounds of this world. The foreign territory has many foreign beings which are all rampant and many of them have tried to invade our Zhenwujie. In the trials, you must eliminate the strange beasts that try to approach Yum, Bai Jian-song said, and then added, certainly, there will be no extremely tyrannical beasts, or you will not be able to deal with them. This time over 1 million new disciples will participate in the competition. Moreover, the disciples of the half-step legendary 3rd stage or higher will also be present among them, Bai Jian-song said and then continued, I have heard that this time many tyrannical youngsters with extraordinary physiques are participating as well. They are already at the half-step legendary 8th or 9th stage. These people are really monstrous and the university must focus on the training of such disciples. Yishuan was surprised when he heard this. It could be said that the experts of the half-stage legendary's 8th and 9th stage already possessed the peak strength of the legendary realm. These experts were considered to be a terrifying presence, and were strong enough to run amok in the southern region. Yishuan had not expected to find such experts among his peers. He was really dumbstruck. Presently, he was at the half-stage legendary's 5th stage and his combat strength was comparable to the half-strength legendary's 6th stage. The young generation was full of talented individuals in hiding, especially people with extraordinary physiques. Therefore, the emergence of these monstrous disciples was not really an issue. Your innate talent is pretty good. I can already tell that you will have boundless future prospects. You shall never be treated as a stepping stone by these monstrous disciples. Bai Jian-song praised Yishuan repeatedly. Presently, the Hidden Star Peak's master and the eldest disciple were in the foreign territory and the second sister was undergoing closed-door training. So, only Bai Jian-song could bear the responsibility of warning Yishuan about these things. Suddenly, a dignified look appeared in Yizaiwen's eyes, and black clouds began to gather up in the distant sky. Yishuan was about to cross the heavenly tribulation. Crap! Do you really want to cross the heavenly tribulation? Bai Jian-song saw the black clouds assembling in the distance. However, he didn't know how the heavenly tribulation had suddenly arrived for Yishuan. Yesterday, Yi Shiwen had showed no signs of facing the heavenly tribulation. This was the indication that he must have obtained enormous benefits from last night's comprehension. No wonder he was about to face the heavenly tribulation, and that too right after the end of his state of enlightenment. Bai Jian-song sighed with emotion. Venturing into a deep state of enlightenment certainly had enormous benefits. Unfortunately, most people rarely got the chance to experience such a state of enlightenment in their entire lives. Yi Shiwen stood up and was about to fly out of the campus of True Martial University. He didn't want to cross the heavenly tribulation here. However, Bai Jian-song stopped him and said, "You can stay here to cross the heavenly tribulation, as it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about crossing the heavenly tribulation here inside True Martial University. You can cross it here on our hidden star peak." Yi Shiwen was convinced that he really wasn't in the Yi Yuan school anymore. In the Yi Yuan school, the entire school would get alarmed if one tried to cross the heavenly tribulation. However, it didn't matter at all in the True Martial University. There were over 1 million new disciples, and many more senior disciples. It could even be said that people kept crossing the heavenly tribulation almost all the time. Yi Shiwen wanted to find a safe place because he was afraid to disturb other people. Although Bai Jian-song was here to lay out the protective barrier which would safeguard him, if the word went out about this, then it would attract people's attention and might compromise his safety. However, now he didn't have the time to think anymore, because the heavenly tribulation had already begun. The heavenly tribulation began to pour down thunder and lightning weapons. Sword, spear, double-edged sword, halberd, a total of 18 kinds of thunder and lightning weapons condensed and rushed down towards Yi Shiwen. It appeared as if he was under a heavy rain of weapons, which finally crashed upon his body. Boom! 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 Bai Jian-song, who was beside Yi Shiwen, coldly snorted and laid out a protective barrier in a flash, thereby preventing the soul searches of the other peaks from probing. Yi Ziwen's heavenly tribulation made him gasp in amazement. This was a strange heavenly tribulation. It was not like an ordinary heavenly tribulation, and was quite terrifying. It could be said that an average person wouldn't be able to survive this tribulation, and wouldn't even dare to think about crossing it. Newcomers Trial Big Competition. This is a trial as well as a competition. It's a trial because new disciples have to face foreign beings and survive. It's a competition because the winners will take back rewards to their peaks. Literal translation for these monster disciples would be evildoers. Soul search or soul perception or soul idea is a method like soul sensing. Experts can use soul search technique to sense a variety of things from afar. They can sense each other, or they can converse with each other using this technique. Chapter 334. Boom! 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 The weapons finally crashed on Yi Ziwen's body and exploded. However, not much damage was caused. It looked as if his body was on fire as a puff of black smoke emitted from it. Yi Shiwen not only looked fearless as he faced the heavenly tribulation, but also operated the newly formed observing person scripture. He absorbed the thunder and lightning weapons in a flash. This was the first time the absorbed energies had not been used in refining his gilded tyrant form. Rather, the entire energy had been absorbed into the chaotic universe inside Yi Ziwen's dantian. Immediately, lightning flashes burst inside his dantian. They seemed to resemble the creation scene of the universe. The original chaotic environment inside his dantian had transformed enormously. The space inside his dantian became even bigger due to the lightning. Yi Shiwen was trying to make use of this tribulation thunder to set up his own universe. At present, it could only be regarded as a dantian, and not really a universe. However, he firmly believed that sooner or later he would be able to set up his own. Following the increase in the absorption of the tribulation thunder, the space within Yi Ziwen's dantian became even bigger. His observing person scripture also became better. The essence of the observing person scripture was to create a small universe within the human body. The power of the heavenly tribulation accelerated this process. Crap! What is this strange practice method of using the tribulation thunder? Bai Jian Song was left dumbstruck as he watched Yi Xuan absorbing the tribulation thunder. This was no ordinary energy, it was the tribulation thunder, the strongest and most violent positive energy in the world. Even if he could successfully absorb these energies, his meridians would be destroyed. It was both beneficial as well as harmful. However, Yi Xuan could actually absorb these energies because his body was tougher than anyone could have imagined. I can tell that he does not have a special physique. Could it be possible that he has practiced an outstanding power technique? Bai Jian Song made obscure speculations. However, Yi Xuan was a disciple of the hidden star peak. The more powerful he became, the happier Bai Jian Song would be. Crash! Bang! The rain of the tribulation thunder became more condensed in the sky, but still they couldn't budge Yi Xuan. Contrary to expectation, he became even more powerful by absorbing the energy in this tribulation thunder. In the sky, the lightning didn't condense to form weapons. Instead, it gave birth to terrifying demons. These beasts began to rush towards Yi Xuan. Bang! 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 The sky emitted an earth-shaking sound as the golden shadows of the lightning demon beasts appeared midair. One after another, these lightning beasts opened their mouths wide like sacrificial bowls, and advanced towards Yi Xuan. Their long-range raid began to shake the entire horizon. Yi Xuan maintained a dignified look. This time, the heavenly tribulation had taken a qualitative leap and had become horribly powerful. This heavenly tribulation was to cross over to the half-step legendary small complete realm. The half-step legendary realm had 3 major tribulations that one must cross, at the time of making the breakthrough into the small complete realm, the full complete realm, and the half-step sage realm. If it had happened earlier, perhaps even Yi Xuan wouldn't have been able to deal with this kind of a heavenly tribulation. However, since he had already created the observing person scripture by then, his understanding of the different types of secret skills had improved. Although the bright jade technique was fair and moderate, Yi Xuan had still created different kinds of secret skills to use this technique in a better way. These skills came in quite handy. However, now that he had created the observing person scripture, he was finally able to wield these skills freely since it was his own power technique. Yi Xuan immediately transformed into a stream of light since he was faced with an army of infinite lightning beasts. He then advanced towards them. It was hard to tell, but perhaps they were several thousand, 10,000 or even more in number. All of them had a ferocious look on their faces. The leader of the lightning beasts let out a roar which shook the heaven and the earth. It seemed as if he could to conquer the world. The leader's imposing aura shook the sky, whereas the electric flashes made it difficult for the people to look at it. The lightning beasts were greatly provoked when they saw that Yi Xuan had not backed down and was rather rushing towards them. They roared over and over, and advanced to kill him. In spite of their grotesque looks, the lightning beasts were still using fine martial arts. Moreover, their martial arts techniques were exquisite, and had an endless might. Yi Xuan roared loudly, and shot his palm forward. A big golden divine hand rose against the wind, and got increasingly bigger. It grabbed dozens of lightning beasts. The lightning beasts were crushed and transformed into the purest of the thunder energies, energies even purer than the ones contained in the raining weapons. These energies were entirely absorbed by Yi Xuan. As a result, his dantian expanded a little more. Along with the primal chaos, the tribulation thunder exploded again and again inside his dantian. This gave rise to a huge chemical reaction. The transformation took place little by little. Yi Xuan didn't hesitate. He shot his fist and superbly displayed the coiling dragon palm. Although he hadn't deduced all its moves, he had already reached the peak of the ones he had. Like a dense rain cloud, Yi Xuan's palm shadow went forward and slapped the lightning beasts in quick succession and dispersed them everywhere. There simply was no way to hurt Yi Xuan. Yi Xuan slaughtered his way around the excessively outrageous army of the lightning beasts. All of them were at the half-step legendary small complete realm. In addition, Some of them were the dreadful beasts of the half-step legendary 6th stage. Although they were attacking Yi Shiwen with all their strength, they were unable to affront his gilded tyrant form. Nothing could be done to hurt him. Even if some of the beasts of the half-step legendary 6th stage were able to injure him, his phoenix regeneration technique would immediately begin to heal his wounds. Yi Zaiwen's palm attack easily smashed several lightning beasts in a single blow, and then completely absorbed their energies. After that, his strength increased further. The more he fought, the fiercer he became. The scene could easily have frightened any witnessing outsider. For most people, the heavenly tribulation was the biggest threat. The problem was the fact that it was very dangerous. Many people couldn't even cross an ordinary one, whereas this was a strange heavenly tribulation. Such a strange heavenly tribulation was very difficult to cross because all its lightning beasts were at the half-step legendary small complete realm. Those who wanted to cross the heavenly tribulation of the small complete realm would have to face these lightning beasts, which was simply impossible. Unquestionably, crushing the lightning beasts with such ease was unthinkable. Although he was at the half-step legendary 5th stage, his combat strength was enough to sweep away the beasts of the half-step legendary 6th stage. His strength was comparable to the combined might of hundreds of individuals of the half-step legendary small complete realm. Only Yi Shiwen could cross this kind of a heavenly tribulation. The other two disciples on the Hidden Star Peak, namely Yang Wenjun and Deng Shui Xian, ran over to watch. They couldn't possibly miss such a huge battle. Bai Jian Song had prevented the soul searches of the experts of other peaks from entering this one using a protective barrier. Even then, how could they not have noticed such a big event? The entire Hidden Star Peak could feel the incomparable pressure of this terrifying heavenly tribulation. This is a strange heavenly tribulation. We definitely don't have any other person like him on our Hidden Star Peak, exclaimed Deng Shui Xian, with her beautiful eyes wide open. She could not believe it because she was a simple-minded disciple. This world of evildoers is too much to take. Ordinary people like us should not confuse our heads in a bid to apprehend it. Yang Wenjun couldn't believe it either. They hadn't seen such a genius crossing a heavenly tribulation. They had seen people who had been called geniuses before, but their heavenly tribulation had never been as strange as his. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen didn't even know how many lightning beasts he had blown off. He was only absorbing their energies and was focusing on the task of setting up the primal chaos within his dantian. As the observing person's scripture was operating inside his body, his comprehension of the same was also rising step by step. Yi Shiwen regained his calm after slaughtering numerous lightning beasts in the sky. Although the lightning beasts had suffered huge damages, they still didn't retreat. Instead, they advanced towards him with all their strength. Bang! When the last lightning beast was smashed by Yi Zaiwen's palm attack, the tribulation clouds began to slowly fade away. As soon as the heavenly tribulation ended, Yi Shiwen made the breakthrough and reached the half-step legendary small complete realm. Yi Shiwen then sat down cross-legged to examine the primal chaos inside his dantian. Finally, a small planet had formed, and had begun to revolve around the sun, which was emitting endless rays of light. Every rotation spurred incomparable terrifying power. Yi Shiwen heaved a sigh of relief because he had finally entered the half-step legendary small complete realm. His combat power had improved, and now it could sweep away even an expert of the half-step legendary 7th stage. In fact, he could even compete against the weak experts of the half-step legendary 8th stage. The heavenly tribulation for entering the half-step legendary small complete realm was one of the 3 tribulations which were the toughest to cross. Yi Shiwen compared this to the previous one, and started to feel that it simply couldn't be done. It was like distinguishing between cloud and mud. Because he had created the observing person scripture, and had crossed this type of a heavenly tribulation, it could even be said that Yi Shiwen could easily cross 10 to 20 more such. Now that he had conveniently grasped it, he could feel the tyrannical power flowing inside his body. Idiom, bloody mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl. Primal chaos, formless mass before creation in Chinese mythology. Evildoer, it is a term used to refer to peerless geniuses, who are very few in numbers and possess unimaginable powers that are hard to understand for ordinary experts. An alternate term for this is monster. Chapter 335. For the next 2 weeks, Yishuan underwent closed-door training. He needed to consolidate his cultivation as he had just made the breakthrough into the half-step legendary's small complete realm. He also needed some time to adapt so that he could thoroughly exhibit his newly gained strength. This morning, the sunlight spread through the earth, tearing down the curtain of night. Yishuan was ready to start his preparation for the upcoming trial. He immediately got up to push open the gate of his small courtyard. At this time, Bai Jiansong, Yang Wenjun and Deng Shui Xin were also ready. Since the last 2 weeks, Yi Ziwen's relationship with them had sincerely improved. He was completely integrated into the Hidden Star Peak. The Hidden Star Peak didn't have many inhabitants. However, all of them were united. He really liked this kind of atmosphere. He didn't like a place where people fight and scheme against each other all the time. Young brother, you must strive for our Hidden Star Peak, Deng Shui Xin said, waving her small fist. Relax. The 6th brother is definitely better than both of you, said Bai Jiansong, looking towards Yishuan. He added, come on, let's go. Under Bai Jiansong's leadership, Yishuan descended from the Hidden Star Peak. He arrived at a spacious and empty valley located nearby. At this time, the valley was densely packed with over 1,000 of new disciples. This time, they were going to proceed towards the foreign territory. They had gathered to go to the foreign territory. 1/3 of these disciples constituted the main forces of the Broken Moon Peak. The Broken Moon Peak was one of the top 100 inheritances. The rest of the new disciples belonged to various other inheritances. Similarly, all other inheritances which were part of the top 100 inheritances had their own teams of new disciples. But, Yishuan was without any companion. The Broken Moon Peak had a mighty team of more than 300 people. This team gave off a completely different feeling in comparison to others. If a person who entered True Martial University was a genius according to the Yuan School's standard, then the people who entered the top 100 inheritances were elites among elites. In fact, these people were considered elites even according to the True Martial University's standard. They were glowing with health and were full of pride. Undoubtedly, the new disciples of other peaks were nothing in comparison to the new disciples of the Broken Moon Peak. As soon as everyone assembled, the elder of the Broken Moon Peak opened the transmission array. He wanted to send these disciples to the foreign battlefield. Among all the nearby inheritances, only the Broken Moon Peak had the transmission array for sending the disciples to the foreign battlefield. In a blink of an eye, everyone was sent to the foreign battlefield. This territory had a vast starry sky gazing downwards. Although it was hard to see in this fuzzy environment, this continent looked huge in comparison to Zhenwujie. It was vast to the extent that one's gaze could not reach its edge. The foreign battlefield was like a huge continent. No one was aware of its length and breadth. It might have extended to hundreds of thousands of miles. The influential forces of Zhenwujie had resisted the invasion of many foreign forces in this foreign battlefield. Everyone had become aware that this was not the most intense battle front. If this was, then it would be impossible for the new disciples to survive. Yishuan looked as far as he could and noticed that it was a completely desolate land. The environment here was not a vacuum as he had imagined. On the contrary, it actually had a slight presence of the spirit energy. Although the environment here was quite harsh, it was not impossible to survive. This spirit energy was very violent. When it blew against one's face, it seemed as if it was scraping the face like a steel knife. In fact, some of the weaker new disciples had their meridians cut after absorbing this spirit energy. Everyone was dumbstruck. This foreign battlefield was more dangerous than they had thought. The new disciples, who were considered treasures in other places, had no importance at all in True Martial University. They were feeling as worthless as a mustard plant. The foreign battlefield lived up to its reputation. The elder of the Broken Moon Peak lightly said, "Well, this is the foreign battlefield. Although it is not the front line, there are many foreign beasts that live here. Our Broken Peak Moon has a city nearby called the Broken Moon City. You can temporarily take shelter there. In the future, you can move out of the city and kill those strange beasts. I believe that before you came here, your seniors must have told you that more the number of beasts you kill, the better result you will get. More resources will be inclined towards your inheritance. All of you are smart and great talents from different regions. You must understand that in order to strive forward, you must rely on your own hands to fight. If you want to succeed, you can only rely on yourself. There are secret heritages that were left behind by many sages here. Whether you can rise or not, that totally depends on you." Everyone got excited and stood up. They were able to stand here because all of them were outstanding talents. They didn't come from a supercilious generation. The many heritages which were left behind by the sages could help them in rising beyond their countless peers. Hence, everyone rolled up their sleeves and geared up for the battle. The elder of the Broken Moon Peak didn't say anything and led them towards the Broken Moon City. Although that city could accommodate 1 million people, at this time it appeared relatively empty. After bringing everyone, the elder of the Broken Moon Peak turned around and flew back. The dim light of the night shrouded the earth. The spirit energy began to sweep across, 100 times more violently than the daytime. In this situation, there was no chance for an average person to survive. Let alone an average person, it was difficult even for a truth-level master to walk in this wilderness. Even the legendary or the half-step legendaries masters could be greatly affected by this. From afar, the intermittent roars of strange beasts reverberated. It was quite terrifying. These were not just the frantic roars of strange beasts, but also the furious roars of Yin spirits. This foreign battlefield was the first battlefront to resist the invasion of foreign forces. Only God knows how many powerhouses had fallen here, many of them had turned into Yin spirits. They were undead creatures who haunted this place. They were very dangerous. If there were no such city, then it would have been impossible for these new disciples to survive in this foreign battlefield. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged in a room inside a small courtyard. The entire city was very big. At present, there were only over 1,000 new disciples inside. So, it seemed that everyone could have their own small courtyard. The spirit energy in the foreign battlefield was 100 times more violent than in Zhenwujie. Even if Yi Shiwen were to absorb this spirit energy with his gilded tyrant form, he would feel quite uncomfortable inside his meridians. Needless to say, the process of absorption would be very difficult for other people. However, the advantage was also obvious. Here, the long-term practice could incessantly increase the strength of one's body little by little. Nevertheless, this pain was nothing more than a tickle for Yi Shiwen. The night in the foreign battlefield was very long and unendurable. The environment of this battlefield was quite harsh. Most of these gods' cherished ones had clearly understood that in this foreign battlefield, they were extremely weak and vulnerable. If I will practice here, perhaps I will again have a breakthrough very soon, Yi Shiwen said while looking towards the strange moonlight outside the window. He also heard the roaring sound of the tyrannical strange beasts. At this time, Yi Mo appeared and said, "However, it is also very dangerous here. The strange beasts in this foreign territory are a huge threat, similar to any other place. These strange beasts are so tyrannical that they have stars as food to survive in this universe." Yi Shiwen nodded and left the room. He trod under the moonlight for a while, and then flew out of the city. Although the environment was quite intense, it was not a problem for his gilded tyrant form. Yi Shiwen flew over 100 miles away from the city. But, suddenly he ran into trouble. Large quantities of Yin Feng blew slantingly and condensed into evil spirits. They were probably the strange beasts that lived here. They could also be the worthy predecessors of true martial university. The predecessors of true martial university had died here and the remnants of their resentment had turned into evil spirits. The leader of those evil spirits suddenly let out a strange cry. Jia Jia, this is such an excellent human specimen. If we devour his energy and blood, then we can condense our own bodies. Then, we will be able to detach ourselves from this ghostly appearance. Accompanied by baneful laughter, an evil spirit condensed its ghostly form. It looked like an ancient general, clad in the scaled armor. His spear was suppressing the sky itself. Unexpectedly, he turned out to be a master of half-step legendary small complete realm. Behind him, many other evil spirits also condensed their forms. Their appearance seemingly changed to the likes of soldiers. The most inferior amongst them was a master of complete truth realm. Whereas, there were many tyrannical ghosts of legendary realm as well. Jia Jia, hand over your body to me. The evil spirit general laughed cruelly. He rushed towards Yi Shiwen, simultaneously thrusting his spear forward. Before arriving in front of Yi Shiwen, it seemed as if the spear had pierced the stars and cracked up the space. These evil spirits would be considered inferior to Yi Shiwen, even before he had crossed the strange heavenly tribulation. Unquestionably, dealing with them was nothing more than a piece of cake for him. Yi Shiwen extended his big hand and grabbed the spear. Once it fell into his grip, the spear couldn't move. Bang! The spear was crushed by Yi Shiwen, causing it to explode. The evil spirit general was also blown off by Yi Ziwen's fist attack. The evil spirit general transformed into a group of energy, which was then absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had used the Tianyuan mirror to transform and absorb the energy. As far as the evil spirit soldiers were concerned, they simply weren't Yi Ziwen's opponents. He immediately grabbed them with his big hand and pinched them to explode. This foreign battlefield is really very dangerous. Even these evil spirits aren't ordinary. Chapter 336. After killing the entire night, Yi Shiwen finally returned to the Broken Moon City with the break of dawn. Everyone had just woken up. The waves of astral wind had blown very violently at night, therefore no one had dared to go out of the city. They could only hide inside the city and wait for dawn. The wind blew feebly in the morning. Hence, even the truth level experts could move about freely. Yi Shiwen mixed into the crowd of people, and they all moved out of the city. However, a terrifying sound reverberated before they could disperse for hunting. This distant sound made everyone tremble with fear. This vibrating sound was similar to the sound of 10,000 stampeding horses, which could cause even the earth to tremble. Taking a broad view ahead, a large group of countless grotesque-looking strange beasts appeared in their line of sight. They were rushing toward them. Roar! 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 What's going on? The ground is shaking. Strange beasts, these are the roars of strange beasts. For the ground to shake like this, how many strange beasts are there? That's a lot of powerful aura, possibly of the Xiantian realm. How can so many of these strange beasts assemble like this? Strange beast insurrection. It's the strange beast insurrection. There were people who understood what was happening and hence, didn't panic. Yi Shiwen was one of them. Bai Jian Song had told him about various things before they had arrived here. This insurrection of strange beasts was their first trial in the foreign battlefield. However, this was not a battlefront. This place didn't have any formidable strange beasts because the experts of True Martial University had already fixed a time to get rid of them in advance. However, it didn't mean that there was no danger. In fact, there were beasts of Truth Realm, Half-Step Legendary Realm and Legendary Realm all over the place. Occasionally, even the beasts of Half-Step Sage Realm could also appear. This place was usually desolate. However, these strange beasts would gather in large numbers every time after the arrival of new disciples. It was not certain as to how many years this fight between the human race and these strange beasts had been going on for. However, one thing was certain: these beasts were very sensitive towards human aura. The dawn had just broken, and these strange beasts had already assembled. Retreat! Let's return to the city. No one knew who shouted this, but everyone directly flew back to the city. Everyone returned to the city wall to prepare for the imminent battle. Meanwhile, those strange beasts were still rushing towards them like endless sea waves, as if blotting out the sky and covering the earth. The long-range raid of these strange beasts shattered the space as they rushed towards the people on the city wall to kill them. Bang! Yi Shiwen shot his palm and it transformed into a huge dragon claw. A huge strange beast that was as big as an elephant had its skull crushed by the dragon claw. That strange beast was 6 feet tall and was different from the commonly seen demon beast. These strange beasts lived in the void of the universe, and weren't the same as other living beings. They were in all sorts of grotesque shapes. The strange beast's essence and blood was instantly absorbed into Yi Zaiwen's body with the help of the Tianyuan mirror. Its inner stone was instantly crushed by Yi Shiwen, and the energy from the stone was completely absorbed by him as well. Yi Shiwen was pleasantly surprised to find that the universe within his dantian had grown a bit larger. Although, the growth was very little and was quite hard to sense, however, he could still feel it. The bodies of these strange beasts had the power of stars. These strange beasts lived in the universal space where one could feel the power of the stars irradiating anywhere, and at any time. Over time, the blood of these strange beasts had also gotten to contain the star power. This star power had made their flesh exceptionally tyrannical. Their body was even tougher than that of demon beasts. Naturally, these strange beasts were more terrifying. However, most of these strange beasts didn't possess a high intelligence quotient. In fact, they didn't even possess the wisdom that their demon beast counterparts did. However, the star power was just a thing of nourishment for Yi Shiwen. He could use it to temper and refine his corporeal body and also to expand the universe within his dantian. Each and every trace of star power could wash and nourish his universe, reinforcing it even more. However, it would take a lot of time if he would only absorb the star power from the illumination of the twinkling stars in the sky, probably hundreds or even thousands of years for his universe to grow to maturity. Yi Mo had told him about another method of exploding a star and taking out its nucleus. This nucleus was the core source of the star power. However, Yi Shiwen didn't even think about his idea because there was no possibility of implementing this method. However, these strange beasts gave Yi Shiwen a much easier option. Yi Shiwen immediately rushed down from the city wall. His body was brimming with golden divinities as he went forward like a huge surging tide, and swept towards those innumerable strange beasts. Puff! 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 These strange beasts of truth level or half-step legendary level simply could not block Yi Zaiwen's attack. They were instantaneously annihilated by him. Afterward, he absorbed their bodies whole. People on the city wall witnessed Yi Zaiwen's aggressive performance, and were left somewhat stunned. Many of them didn't even know that it was Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen's performance was quite stunning, and these beasts were basically far from being his opponents. However, some people were stimulated into action while everyone else was attentively watching his performance. They too rushed down from the city wall to fight these strange beasts. However, some of them were torn to pieces in a short while. Some managed to persist for a while, but soon exhausted their strength and were eaten by those strange beasts. It turned out that it was radically impossible for an average person to do the things that Yi Shiwen could, simply because he was way too strong. On the tall wall, a pair of ice-cold eyes was keeping a close eye on Yi Shiwen as he decisively killed the strange beasts. There flashed a beam of cold light in that pair of icy eyes. Within a few breaths, Yi Shiwen easily rushed through the group of numerous strange beasts. It could be considered that other people were worried that they had to fight with a group of strange beasts. However, Yi Shiwen was fearless. These strange beasts didn't have any means to injure his tyrannical body. Not to mention that his phoenix regeneration technique would instantly heal his wounds even if they were hurt him. Yi Zaiwen's physical strength was so plentiful that there was no possibility of consuming his life force in a way that might endanger his life. The golden divinities surged within his body as he opened his devil wings and flew forward at an extremely fast speed. This place didn't have an enemy of his match. Who is this man? He dared to burst into the army of strange beasts. Is he insane? Isn't this person that same Yishuan whose name had made a buzz everywhere? Has he not entered the hidden star peak? I never thought that he would be able to join True Martial University so smoothly after insulting the disciples of Law Enforcement Hall. But he is really strong. At least dozens of strange beasts have died at his hands in such a short time. He is worth of his fierce and illustrious reputation. The fight had reached to an intense level. Over 10,000 Hotian-level strange beasts had surrounded the entrance. When looking from afar, one could see silhouettes of these strange beasts everywhere. Each of these beasts appeared to be in frenzy. Their eyes were bloodshot and they appeared to be fierce and brutal. Hundreds of legendary realm beasts released out their terrifying auras from among these densely packed strange beasts. They stirred together to form a pillar of energy which directly agitated the clouds and formed a huge swirl. The mighty coercion of these strange beasts blotted out the sky, and covered the earth. The fight between the humans and these strange beasts had reached a superheated stage near the city wall. White and red pieces of broken limbs were scattered on the ground. It was hard to distinguish whether those limbs belonged to humans or the strange beasts. The number of human elites was comparatively less than those densely packed numerous strange beasts. Ha! Suddenly, a loud cry reverberated from the side of human experts. The sword energy was swept towards those strange beasts with the mighty slash. The space collapsed in a flash. The beasts that came in contact of the sword energy screamed as they turned into blood fog. This sword attack had directly cleared up a batch of strange beasts. However, the total number of these strange beasts was massive. Some strange beasts grouped together to replace that annihilated batch almost immediately. The half-step legendary realm human experts began to send out their mystical powers in quick succession. However, even that could not sway the defense line of these truth-level and half-step legendary-level strange beasts. Roar! 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 After issuing such mighty roars, the strange beasts of legendary realms suddenly rushed towards the entrance. Although these were only several hundred strange beasts, their advance made the earth to tremble. The imposing aura of these strange beasts was far more formidable as compared to that the strange beasts of truth level and half-step legendary level. The defense line of the human race was already in imminent danger. It was on the verge of collapse due to the long-range raid of those several hundred legendary level strange beasts. These strange beasts of legendary level were extremely fast, and in a flash, one of them arrived in front of Yishuan. Its eyes were bloodshot and its body was covered with 18 legs. Just like lightning, it used its claw to grab Yishuan. Bang! Yishuan didn't hesitate to respond, and immediately shot his palm. Bang! The claw of that beast exploded in a flash, and turned to blood fog. Roar! That strange beast screamed as blood started dripping out from the spot where its limb had turned into blood fog. However, this strange beast didn't stop. It opened its big mouth to bite Yishuan to death. Humph! Yishuan snorted as his fist blasted forward and directly punched through its big mouth. The head of this strange beast exploded as it died on the spot. It could be assumed that crashing into such group of strange beasts was equivalent to courting death for others. However, this was not the case for Yishuan since his strength was simply too formidable. It was impossible for these strange beasts to consume him, thanks to his gilded tyrant form in coordination with his Phoenix generation technique. Chapter 337. These strange beasts were certainly powerful because of their tyrannical bodies. But Yishuan also had a tyrannical body. In this respect, it was a neck-to-neck collision. In short, the ordinary strange beasts of Legendary Realm were not his opponents. Puff! A huge column of fire was ejected out from the mouth of a strange beast of half-step legendary third stage, and it went blazing towards Yishuan. He felt the heat of that flame blowing against his own face. Yi Shiwen shot his palm, and it rose up against the wind. His palm grabbed that column of fire and instantly extinguished it. The strength of his palm attack didn't reduce one bit as it advanced and banged upon the body of that beast. Bang! The body of that huge legendary level beast instantaneously flew upside down. It severely collided with a group of several legendary level beasts, and then fell heavily to the ground and died. However, those other beasts which had gotten hit also fell to the ground and died. Yi Shiwen looked just like a raging war beast. He was on a killing spree. So much so, that he could be regarded as a roller crushing those beasts. Wherever he went, casualties on the beast's side followed. He was simply unstoppable. Yi Shiwen went all the way down killing those strange beasts. His body became more and more powerful, while the universe within his dantian expanded. In addition, his aura also became increasingly formidable. Those experts who saw him fight had no choice but to agree that his strength was indeed excessively tyrannical. That Yi Shiwen is killing his way forward like nothing. Does he think that he can penetrate the army formation of these strange beasts? Some people felt incredible watching Yi Shiwen penetrating through the army formation of strange beasts by killing them. They didn't know what he was up to. At this time, an ominous aura swept across the entire battlefield, as if blotting out the sky and covering the earth. It belonged to a strange beast of legendary 8th stage. Its vindictive aura sent chills down everyone's spine. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen's eyes flashed. These strange beasts possessed star power. Stronger a beast, more the star power it would have. In fact, this relation was directly proportional in nature. He would definitely move a step further if he could kill this strange beast of legendary 8th stage. In fact, he would be able to condense a new planet, Venus, within his body. Yes. Yi Shiwen was going to construct a solar system inside his universe. The universe had so many celestial bodies, but he was familiar with the solar system only. Therefore, he wanted to create it first. Presently, he had molded only the Sun and Mercury in the entire solar system. Continuing on like this, he would certainly mold Venus now. After the completion of Venus, the next ones would be Earth and Mars. This was the so-called inner solar system. He was absolutely confident that he would be able to break through the shackles of the legendary realm in one fell swoop once the creation of the entire solar system was complete. At that time, his moves would have the strength of the universe, while his tyrannical strength would reach an even more dreadful extent. Taking a broad view ahead, one could see the huge figure of a monster with many scales on its body. Its 6 feet were touching the ground. It appeared like a small hill. It was running towards them while causing the entire ground to tremble. Its entire body was covered with scales, and it relied on a pair of weird-looking thin wings to lighten its weight. The experts at the top of the city walls saw this strange beast arriving, and their complexions turned pale. The terrifying vigor of this strange beast overflew everywhere. It was simply frightening. Who was going to stop this strange beast? It should be said that there was no one here who could stop this strange beast. Half-step legendary 8th stage, it was a terrifying synonym for these new disciples. And, now such a creature had appeared among these strange beasts. It could be said that it was a disaster for these new disciples. Yi Shiwen looked dignified, and didn't show any signs of retreat. At present, he was at half-step legendary's small complete realm, and could compete with some weak creatures of half-step legendary 8th stage, at most. However, the word weak and this strange beast obviously had no relation. In fact, it would be considered the most tyrannical existence even among the beasts of half-step legendary 8th stage. A sword intention came out from Yi Shiwen's hand. It then rose into the sky and emitted intermittent waves of coercion in all directions. It seemed as if Yi Shiwen had discovered his prey. Yi Shiwen had noticed that 4 of its legs were well grounded the moment that strange beast had started rushing. He figured that the remaining 2 were claws, just a bear's. Like a lightning, it rushed towards Yi Shiwen to grab him. The long howl of this strange beast tore through the 9 heavens. It didn't seem like a living being at all, rather like a dead creature that had appeared from hell. It was very scary. In that split second, it swatted its claws which broke the space into pieces. That pair of thin wings finally drove its body forward and it arrived in front of Yi Shiwen at a lightning pace. Those thin wings were setting off waves of strong winds, sweeping its ominous aura in all directions. Clang! The sword intention instantaneously spewed out from Yi Zaiwen's hand and got mixed with the golden divinities. Then it soared into the sky and instantaneously advanced towards that strange beast. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's sword intention slashed on that strange beast's scales. However, it only made a scratch on the scales, and failed to break them. The clash released sparks in all directions. It sounded similar to a collision between iron and gold. Bang! The entire space had undergone a tremendous collapse as a result of a man attacking a beast. Both of their killing intentions had almost pierced the space. Yi Shiwen retreated a few steps during that terrifying collision. His complexion had also slightly discolored. The body of this strange beast was too horrifying. He was actually unable to neutralize it, even with his gilded tyrant form. The fact was that not only was he one whole realm below that strange beast, the body of this strange beast was ridiculously tough. Even if another person of half-step legendary 8th stage would be placed in Yi Zaiwen's shoes, it would be difficult for them to avoid injuries. The terrifying power of that strange beast shook Yi Zaiwen's hands and caused them to turn numb. However, the same enormous power was shifted into his universe and immediately disappeared without a trace, just like a raindrop on barren land. Even such enormous power was unable to affect the operation of his universe. Roar! That strange beast faced upwards and roared loudly. Its ominous power was monstrous and dreadful. It brandished its claws. It seemed as if could grab the space itself and cause it to crack. It rushed straight towards Yi Shiwen. Although it was only one strange beast, its ominous power was simply matchless. Yi Shiwen was glowing with vigor. His eyes were radiating glory. The golden divinities surged beneath his feet and he instantly rushed forward carrying sword intention in his hand. Bang! The collision between both the sides once again shattered the space. This time, Yi Zaiwen's sword intention struck that strange beast's chest and opened a terrible wound. This left that strange beast in immense pain, and it roared immediately. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't in a good condition either. That strange beast had opened 5 big and bloody wounds on his chest. Yi Shiwen began to gape in pain. He almost couldn't stand properly. If it were an ordinary person in place of him, then that claw would have definitely split them into 2 halves. Does he want to die? At this time, a lot of people looked worried while looking at Yi Shiwen. Many didn't know him, but still were worried for him. This was because they were counting of him as their last hope. This wasn't the end, just the beginning. Yi Shiwen didn't admit defeat. Although his face had contorted in agony, the Phoenix regeneration technique was done repairing his wounds soon. Yi Zaiwen's sword energy was released in all directions. He shouted loudly, "Die!" Yi Shiwen once again rushed towards that strange beast. Bang! The sword intention he was carrying overflowed through the sky. Bang! 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 They had already fought over 100 rounds. Blood was dripping from their bodies, and not enough meat was remaining on it. However, Yi Shiwen had maintained himself at his peak physical condition throughout. Although his entire body was covered in blood, not a single wound was there on it. However, that strange beast was panting and seemed to have been beaten out of its breath. Yi Shiwen had pushed it in a completely disadvantageous position. That strange beast didn't have the Phoenix regeneration technique like Yi Shiwen. There was no way for it to repair its wounds, or to restore its tyrannical strength in such a short period of time after being wounded. However, Yi Zaiwen's gilded tyrant form was extremely tyrannical. He just used his own body to blast open wounds in its body. Perhaps, each of these wounds was not extremely fatal on its own, but there were simply too many, enough to be life-threatening. This was the first time that Yishuan had fought with a beast of half-step legendary 8th stage. He was sure that he would have died countless times if he didn't have Phoenix regeneration technique. This strange beast had caused severe wounds on his body. No other person could have survived till now. It was only possible for Yishuan. Yishuan had finally cornered that strange beast. There were cuts and bruises all over his body, while blood was continuously gushing out of the wounds. It had finally slowed down and was slowly revealing its weaknesses. "Now, die!" Yishuan shouted loudly. The sword intention from his hand swept out and dashed across the sky. Puchi! The sword intention instantly dashed through a wound located on its head. A mix of red blood and white brain matter spattered everywhere. Bang! The huge stature of that strange beast collapsed, and shook the entire ground. Everyone noticed that Yishuan had beheaded that strange beast. The fact that he was able to kill that strange beast had stunned them. They had a sudden illusion of managing to have a narrow escape. If not for Yishuan, they all would have most likely been massacred in the city. Yishuan finally heaved a sigh of relief as he saw the scene of desolation in the aftermath of this disaster. He was about to take away the corpse of that strange beast, when suddenly a strong sense of crisis leaped up in his heart and a chill ran from the soles of his feet to his brain. A cold beam instantly appeared out of nowhere, and quietly shattered the space. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Yishuan. It was an extremely magnificent, yet dreadful beam of light. Notes: Jian Qi equals sword energy. Chapter 338. A cold beam instantly appeared out of nowhere, and quietly shattered the space. Then, it arrived in front of Yishuan in the blink of an eye. It was an extremely magnificent yet dreadful beam of light. That cold beam was extremely frightening and almost made a cut in Yishuan's throat. This was an astonishing killer move. The timing was near perfect. Yishuan had just slaughtered that strange beast and had finally gotten a chance to relax. It was the best time to launch a sneak attack on him. However, how could Yishuan ever take things lightly? He responded instinctively and shot a big hand. His hand appeared just like a golden sun in the sky. Bang! Yishuan brandished his palm into the void and a figure instantaneously fell. The bones of his chest broke and blood splashed out. His body was sent flying upside down. Yishuan wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. That sneak attack could have succeeded in beheading him since he was off guard when it was launched at him. Yishuan saw that a young man clad in a magnificent robe was lying on the ground. He had curled up in pain while his face had turned pale. He also kept spitting blood. The emblem of Law Enforcement Hall was embroidered on his robe. Damn it, he is from Law Enforcement Hall. Yishuan saw the emblem on that man's robe and cursed. These law enforcement disciples were really haunting Yishuan like ghosts. He had been wondering why they hadn't been causing him any trouble all this time. But now it seemed like they had been waiting for him here. They were too sinister. They made their move just when Yishuan killed that strange beast. The people on top of the city wall hadn't recovered from this sudden turn of events. They had seen how Yishuan had killed that strange beast with great difficulty, and had then been ambushed by someone. Although they were very far from the scene, they all had profound skills. They didn't find it hard to make sense of the current situation. They immediately understood that someone had tried to assassinate Yishuan. This is a disciple of Law Enforcement Hall. Suddenly many people recognized him after looking at the emblem of Law Enforcement Hall. The reputation of Law Enforcement Hall in true martial university was illustrious. There was no one who didn't know about them, even these new disciples knew about Law Enforcement Hall though they had just joined. Law Enforcement Hall had magnificent glory. They were in charge of law and discipline inside true martial university. The enmity between the disciples of Law Enforcement Hall and Yishuan seems quite deep. They were hidden till now, but have finally moved into action. Some people were unclear and puzzled as to when Yishuan had offended these law enforcement disciples. don't you know that there was a buzz in the entire city some time ago? A new disciple had killed several disciples of Law Enforcement Hall, don't you remember? Oh, so this is that matter, and is he that Yi Shiwen? He's the one who had broken through the city gate to enter, right? No wonder he is so powerful. A total of 100 disciples had burst their way through the city gate along with him. Seriously, he is a respectable genius. That sneak attack could have killed Yi Shiwen, and this made him angry. He walked coldly and kicked that disciple's body. That disciple was sent flying like a sandbag after Yi Shiwen kicked him. He severely collided with the city wall, and came to a halt before finally falling down. Stop! Someone yelled from the top of the city wall. The speaker was a young man who appeared approximately 20 years old, and was clad in a brown robe. His eyebrows were like sword, and his eyes were like stars. He appeared very handsome and made large strides as he walked over. Who are you? Why are you interfering in other people's business? Yi Shiwen asked coldly. He is a disciple of our Broken Moon Peak. Therefore, I must interfere regardless of anything, that young man coldly replied. Above the city wall, several people recognized this young man. That man is Ling Yifeng. He is the leader of the new disciples of Broken Moon Peak. I have heard that this person is an outstanding young genius, and was considered as one of the top 10 experts on the ancient road. He is quite ferocious. Yes, he entered as a core disciple and will soon become a true disciple. The Law Enforcement Hall was a huge organization inside True Martial University. However, their disciples had actually come from various peaks. Do you really want to interfere in this trivial matter? Yi Shiwen coldly asked. He is a disciple of our Broken Moon Peak. Ling Yifeng looked coldly towards Yi Shiwen. The killing intent could be seen in his eyes. He had heard about Yi Shiwen. In fact, more than 100 disciples had broken through the city gate. And all information about these disciples had already circulated throughout True Martial University. Yi Shiwen was no exception. I am dealing with your Broken Moon Peak's disciple because he was going to kill me. It is that simple. Yi Shiwen coldly said. His logic was quite simple. Whoever tried to kill him, he would kill that person in return. Yi Shiwen sneered and suddenly rushed forward. It seemed as if he was treading on a burst of waves to trample that disciple. Stop! Ling Yifeng saw that Yi Shiwen had completely ignored him. And so, he immediately fired a punch. The terrifying fist energy surged forward. It gave rise to a fist wind that ferociously rushed forth to pound Yi Ziwen's back. After perceiving the fierce fist wind coming from behind, Yi Ziwen's eyes flickered with a killing intent. This fist wind was extremely terrifying. Perhaps, Ling Yifeng's strength had already reached above half-step legendary 7th stage. How could there be such a great disciple in Law Enforcement Hall? Were the disciples of Broken Moon Peak so amazing? However, it didn't matter whether he was a disciple of Broken Moon Peak or not, he was trying to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen felt the fierce fist wind behind his body, but he didn't stop. On the contrary, he ferociously rushed towards that disciple of Broken Moon Peak at an even faster speed. You are courting death. Yi Ziwen's action had thoroughly enraged Ling Yifeng. He saw the manner in which Yi Shiwen had looked down on him. This made him very angry. He shouted loudly and his real elemental energy swept towards Yi Shiwen to blast him to death. Anger flourished inside Yi Ziwen's heart, and he maliciously trampled that disciple. Bang! That disciple of Law Enforcement Hall who was lying on the ground was instantly trampled to death. Ling Yifeng saw Yi Shiwen killing that law enforcement disciple, and his complexion turned ashen. He was considered as a genius ever since he had started cultivating as a young disciple. Even if the geniuses on this ancient road were countless like clouds, he was still considered extraordinary. No one ever dared to go against him. But now, a disciple of his own peak had been killed in front of his eyes. This was intolerable. You have brought about your own destruction. Ling Yifeng roared repeatedly. the fist wind had already crashed into Yi Zaiwen's body. A strong power boiled all over Yi Zaiwen's body. Though Ling Yifeng was arrogant, his strength of half-step legendary 7th stage was no joke. Yi Xuan draped a layer of divine clothing over his shoulder, and his figure immediately condensed a golden sword behind him to chop off that fist wind. Yi Xuan had completely transformed to assume his golden avatar. He then looked coldly towards Ling Yifeng. How did these two bump into each other? Geez, Ling Yifeng failed in rescuing that disciple of Broken Moon Peak. Broken Moon Peak is quite overbearing. We saw a moment ago how that disciple of Broken Moon Peak tried to assassinate Yi Xuan and Ling Yifeng didn't say anything. Instead he actually showed his desire to take that disciple back home. This is making me angry. Hush, hush, can't you see there are so many disciples of Broken Moon Peak here? They may expel you from the city if you offend them. In the worst case scenario, they might even kill you right now. These big inheritances are not always fair, especially those top 100 inheritances. They don't even treat us as fellow disciples. They are way too tyrannical. You have killed a disciple of Broken Moon Peak, and that makes you our enemy. You have courted death. Ling Yifeng said angrily. Yi Xuan didn't say anything. He just brandished his long blade which emitted bright rays of light. It appeared as if the existing light in this world had suddenly vanished, and only this blade's radiance had remained. Ling Yifeng's complexion changed drastically, and became abnormally solemn. His real elemental energy surged up and he operated his secret technique. He instantly fired his fist which shattered the space as it rushed towards the incoming blade attack of Yi Zaiwen's. Ling Yifeng's strength wasn't equal to that strange beast's from a while ago. However, he still couldn't be considered as a lesser threat. This was because that strange beast used its tyrannical body to its advantage in close combat, which was also Yi Zaiwen's strong point. Though Ling Yifeng didn't have such a tough body, his martial art was quite exquisite. That was why he was the biggest threat. Bang! The blade energy and the fist energy collided in the void, and the terrifying force set off dreadful storm waves. Yi Zaiwen's blade energy directly chopped through Ling Yifeng's fist energy, and then crashed into his body almost instantaneously. Puchi! A bloody wound was cut open on Ling Yifeng's chest, and blood gushed out of it. His tall body finally collapsed on the ground. One move had decided the outcome of this battle. Everyone was stunned. They had assumed that it would be a ferocious battle between two equally matched opponents. However, they had never imagined that a single move of Yi Zaiwen's would decide this battle once and for all. Ling Yifeng had never imagined that he would fail to stop even a single move of Yi Zaiwen's, and would end up being defeated like this. He didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because Yi Xuan was way too strong. After creating observing person scripture, Yi Zaiwen's combat power had increased by leaps and bounds. An expert of half-step legendary 7th stage was simply not his opponent. Yi Xuan looked at Ling Yifeng's fallen figure. He knew that he could not stay in Broken Moon City any longer. However, he didn't have any regrets. If given another opportunity he would do the same again. The other party had blundered by regarding him as a pushover. However, they never knew that he could be so decisive. 1. Zhenyuan equals real elemental energy. 2. Blade energy equals Bladiki. Chapter 339. The news of Yi Xuan slaughtering a law enforcement disciple and Ling Yifeng had shaken the entire Broken Moon City. The news had spread as quickly as forest fire. The news spread even more quickly especially since those people were resolute and had high aspirations. It had immediately made the new law enforcement disciples furious. These new disciples had recently joined True Martial University. However, some of them had already been recruited by Law Enforcement Hall since they had great future potential. Therefore, there were many new law enforcement disciples among these disciples who had come to this foreign battlefield. Yi Xuan had killed a law enforcement disciple in front of everyone, once again. This was very embarrassing for them. However, everyone had seen that the law enforcement disciple had attacked Yishuan first. Therefore, Yi Zaiwen's slaughter of that disciple was only normal. Hence, he would only get minor punishments even if the news were to reach the ears of higher authorities. And this certainly didn't conform to Law Enforcement Hall's way of thinking. The Law Enforcement Hall's leader of new disciples, Luo Yi-hang, moved into action at this juncture. He issued a warrant to hunt and kill Yishuan. But this chase and kill warrant could not be released in public. However, Luo Yi-hang was not only the captain of law enforcement disciples, he was also the chief disciple of 100 Treasures Peak. The 100 Treasures Peak was one of the top 10 inheritances. These top 10 inheritances were considered as big shots in true martial university. Any among these inheritances would be regarded as supreme influence in the southern region. To enter one of these inheritances and become the chief disciple was not an easy thing. One could imagine Luo Yi-hang's strength and the authority he held. The chase and kill warrant was issued in secrecy. However, there was no difference between an official order and the one that came from Luo Yi-hang's mouth. In addition to Law Enforcement Hall, the Broken Moon Peak had also semi-overtly issued a chase and kill warrant against Yishuan. Yishuan had killed 2 disciples of Broken Moon Peak. This included their 4th-ranked disciple, Ling Yifeng. It was a matter of extraordinary shame and humiliation for the Broken Moon Peak. Yishuan was merely a disciple of the Hidden Star Peak. That being said, Yishuan was also a chief disciple. However, how someone could be considered as a true chief disciple if there was no other disciple on the peak? Ling Yifeng was the 4th-ranked disciple of the Broken Moon Peak. This meant that there were 3 stronger disciples above him. But he alone was below 50 years of age amongst the top 4. However, a lot of masters on that peak were above 50 years of age. These masters might not be as talented as him. However, their cultivation time was far more than his, even extending up to decades or more than a century in some cases. There were numerous such masters on this peak. The experts below the age of 50 were placed in the rear because of the relationship between their age and strength, since it was a relatively safer area. However, the experts who were above 50 years old were placed close to the battle front. This was the spot where genuine powerhouses strived for their place. All the top experts of this term's younger generation had arrived at this place. Yishuan knew about the chase and kill warrants. But he didn't care. The most important thing for him was to enhance his own strength now. Only those whose strength was tyrannical enough would be able to survive in this trial. This was the only way to rise above others. The curtain of night descended, and waves of chilly winds started blowing. It could be said that this cold winds could easily blow away a truth-level expert. Such was the terror of the foreign battlefield Yishuan was in. Yishuan trod through the astral wind unaffected, as if it was not blowing at all. He arrived on top of a mountain. The star power was illuminating this summit and was relatively rich. A shadow appeared on top of the summit amidst the chilly winds. It had sensed Yi Zaiwen's aura. It was a ferocious, strange beast. It had 3 pairs of wings, and it appeared just like a human. Its head was quite big, and it had 4 limbs. Its entire body was withered. Its eyes were as red as a pair of lanterns. They were partly visible in that chilly wind, and appeared very frightening. This territory belonged to this strange beast. It was an extremely dreadful strange beast. It was at legendary 7th stage, at the very least. It was the overlord of the surrounding area. Suddenly, that strange beast howled. It caused burst of sound waves which shook the space. The space began to fluctuate as crazily as the surface of boiling water. This strange beast had 6 wings on its back. They had almost dried up, leaving only the bones behind. It suddenly fluttered its wings, and its figure rushed towards Yishuan like a black light. It shot its palms, which pressed down the space itself and disintegrated the air. A terrifying palm attack was launched towards Yishuan. That pair of bone claws tore the space, and set off monstrous waves of wind. It started blowing Yi Zaiwen's clothes. This resulted in a fluttering sound. Yi Shiwen saw the incoming attack, but simply didn't care. He directly swept out his palm. A huge golden dragon roared, and instantly tore that dreadful imposing aura. Then, it maliciously collided into that pair of claws. Crunch, the sound of a fracturing bone resounded. This sound could horrify anyone. That pair of bone claws had been broken by Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's figure appeared like golden lightning as he trod across the empty sky, and instantaneously appeared in front of that strange beast. He brandished his palm, and crushed its body. Its flesh and blood were completely absorbed by Heavenly Source Mirror. The inner stone of that strange beast also fell into Yi Ziwen's hands. However, Yi Shiwen didn't stop. All sorts of strange beasts and evil spirits were lurking in this area since it was flourishing with chill winds. They were large in numbers, and could all become Yi Ziwen's prey. The sound produced when Yi Shiwen slaughtered that strange beast had alarmed the other strange beasts. There were over 100 strange beasts of legendary 6th-7th stage. There were no names to identify their species. However, they were very ferocious in nature and frightened everyone. Now give me your inner stones. Yi Shiwen laughed out loud as he flew forward. It seemed as if his golden divinities would topple the mountains and overturn the seas as they rushed towards those strange beasts. Bang! A flock of tyrannical strange beasts rushed towards Yi Shiwen like wild boars to knock him down. Yi Shiwen immediately swatted his palm. Their bodies instantaneously exploded and transformed into blood fog. The fog was then absorbed by Heavenly Source Mirror. Only their inner stones remained behind. These domineering strange beasts were like tyrants who dominated over other strange beasts. However, Yi Shiwen had thoroughly wiped their entire existence within a short span of time. Would the other strange beasts dare to attack Yi Shiwen after watching this? Wouldn't that be equivalent to courting death? Yi Shiwen had obtained enough inner stones. Hence, he didn't hunt more strange beasts, and sat cross-legged on that summit. He instantly absorbed the abundant star power which was shining down from the sky. As a result, his inner universe began to transform. Yi Shiwen fully operated the observing person scripture. The intrinsic quality of this scripture was to create a small version of the universe inside human body. His universe merely had a star and a planet at present. Yi Shiwen started to absorb the energies from those inner stones as the observing person scripture began to operate at full capacity. These inner stones were the energy's cores of these strange beasts. Their entire energy was accumulated in these inner stones. Moreover, these strange beasts had received the illumination power of stars day and night. Their bodies were filled with star power, that was exactly what Yi Shiwen needed. The chaos within his universe began to boil over with the absorption of a large amount of star power. There were all kinds of luminous spots within Yi Ziwen's Dantian. These luminous spots were numerous and all densely packed. Yet, they were located away from each other with a certain distance in between. These luminous spots instantaneously began to blossom into dazzling rays of light as large amounts of star power were instilled into his inner universe. One of these luminous spots began to absorb large amount of star power under the guidance of his consciousness. The luminous spot began to revolve at a great speed, and continued till the power of countless stars had been submerged into it. This luminous point slowly began to expand once it had absorbed the power of so many stars. The temperature of this spherical luminous spot slowly began to rise. However, this didn't worry Yi Shiwen. Day by day time passed, and this luminous spot got bigger and bigger. It slowly took the shape of a planet. In fact, it had started to appear just like the planet Venus from his previous life. Bang! Venus had been molded at last. Yi Ziwen's imposing aura finally rose once again. Moreover, his universe had also expanded by 1/3 because of Venus formation. However, the universe was inside Yi Ziwen's Dantian. Since the universe had expanded by 1/3, it meant that his Dantian had also expanded by 1/3. It could now hold 30% more real elemental energy. His strength had risen considerably as a result. Yi Shiwen could only compete with weak experts of legendary 8th stage. But now, he was sure that he would be able to compete with the top powerhouses of legendary 8th stage even though his realm hadn't ascended, and he was still at half-step legendary's small complete realm. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. He realized that his imposing aura had become even more terrifying. He restrained it. Many strange beasts who were observing him from afar trembled with fear. It seemed like these muddle-headed strange beasts that only knew how to kill had apparently learnt fear as well. The way Yi Shiwen had mercilessly slaughtered their brethren had left them with a deep sense of fear. In order to deal with these strange beasts, one needed to be more brutal than them. Only then could one scare away these strange beasts. You couldn't level up this time. However, your strength is sufficient to compete with the top powerhouses of half-step legendary 8th stage. You will be counted among the top-ranked disciples even if we include those above 50 years old new disciples in the equation. Yi Mo said with a smile. Arriving at this foreign battlefield had brought several rewarding benefits for Yi Shiwen. His observing person scripture was currently at its initial stage, and the power of these stars was the best form of nourishment for his universe. But this is not enough. Yi Shiwen shook his head. There were too many experts inside True Martial University. The strongest ones were elusive and stayed hidden, especially those who had been cultivating for a long time. There were innumerable such hidden experts. Yi Shiwen had been lagging behind. But he had started to catch up now. He was slowly filling the gap between him and these people. I still have a dragon essence left in the stock. Yi Shiwen had 2 dragon essences earlier. However, he had used one during a closed-door practice in order to avoid a confrontation with the genie guards. Hence, only 1 dragon essence had remained. My cultivation should be able to make a breakthrough to half-step legendary 6th stage after consuming this dragon essence. Then, I will be able to beat even the experts of half-step legendary 9th stage. Even if that Luo Yihang personally arrives, I will beat the crap out of him. Yi Shiwen said coldly. A burst of noise came from afar at this time, and a shaking sword rainbow suddenly flitted across the sky. Heavenly Source Mirror equals Tianyuan Mirror. He has the Sun and Mercury inside his inner universe. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.